LoveLore Library. Chapter 67. Fugui and Kai Yun were originally servants of Ci Shao Garden. Although they weren't as respected as Ji Xiang and Ru Yi in front of the old madam, they were still senior servant girls with a first-class monthly salary. They originally thought that Qin Huining handled matters well and was quite liked by the old madam. She was also the eldest master's adopted daughter, so it would be good for her to serve her. Who knew that by her side, she would have to face her master's bad temper every day? She had to endure much more than when she served the old madam. Who would have thought that Miss Huining, who looked gentle and dignified in the past, would be like this in private? Therefore, at this time, Fugui couldn't bear to see Miss Huining being so unreasonable when fourth young miss came to give her something out of the kindness of her heart. Fugui gently placed the teacup next to Qin Yining's hand and smiled awkwardly and fawningly. Qin Yining smiled and shook her head, indicating that she didn't care. She would never deliberately make things difficult for servants because her previous status was even lower than these servant girls. She knew the difficulties of being a servant. You can leave. You don't need to serve here for the time being. Fugui smiled gratefully. Just as she was about to speak, she heard Qin Huining's sinister voice. What? This is Snow Pear Courtyard, not your master's study. What right do you have to order my people around? Qin Yining raised her eyebrows and looked at Qin Huining. She smiled and said, I think Miss Huining still doesn't understand. Isn't Snow Pear Courtyard Qin Manor's Snow Pear Courtyard? I'm the young miss of the family Qin. Which servant in the family Qin Manor can't I order around? Don't come to my place to show off. Qin Huining gritted her teeth. Qin Yining was still sitting leisurely. She picked up the white porcelain teacup and took a sip before smiling and saying, How could that be? Miss Huining is joking. I'm just being reasonable. Being reasonable? You're the one who's being reasonable. Qin Huining's voice gradually became sharper. Qin Yining raised his index finger and gestured for her to keep quiet. If you are in the right, it doesn't matter how loud you are. Huining miss, if Nanny Jean sees you like this, she will definitely punish you by making you stand. Qin Huining clenched his fists and glared fiercely at Qin Yining. He took a few deep breaths before he could suppress his anger. Only then did he realize that she had been standing and talking to Qin Yining. Qin Yining had been sitting calmly as if she had become his servant. Shame, anger, and resentment once again occupied her mind, but she had nowhere to vent it. Qin Huining turned around and slapped Fugui in the face. You bitch. My Snow Pear Courtyard is too small for you. Don't you know what kind of person you're trying to climb up the social ladder? Fugui was inexplicably slapped in the face. He covered his face and knelt on the ground, sobbing. Qin Yining slowly stood up and said, Miss Huining wants to discipline her servant, so it's not good for me to intervene. However, punishing a maidservant who didn't do anything wrong is too shameful. Our family Qin has never had such an evil master. I advise you to restrain yourself. Don't start a bad example and hurt old madam and mother's hearts. Who do you think you are? I don't need you to advise me. Qin Yining didn't feel like arguing with Qin Huining and only said, Mother told me to come and give you something. I had no choice but to come. Otherwise, do you think I like seeing your hypocritical face in front of others and revealing your true colors? You can slowly eat the snacks. Mother said that she wants to make the fox fur into a scarf and a sleeping rabbit. Or if you have other uses for it, you can go back with Mother. I'll take my leave. Qin Yining called Song Lan and Bing Tang and was about to leave. Qin Huining angrily glared and sneered, If you don't pick the leftovers, you won't give them to me. Don't think I don't know that my fur is also the leftovers you picked. She was simply unreasonable. Qin Yining's footsteps paused as she was about to leave. Seeing her stop, Qin Huining was so scared that she subconsciously shrank back. There was no other way. Qin Yining had already traumatized her. Qin Yining only looked back with a smile and said slowly, "You can think whatever you want. I originally disdained to pay attention to people like you, but now I've changed my mind. I'll tell you clearly that I want to bully you, and I want to bully you to death. What can you do about it?" "You." Qin Huining was so angry that her lips trembled. "If you have the ability, then bully me back. I'll welcome you at any time. If you don't have the ability, then no matter how angry you are, you can only hold it in." "Qin Yining. You've gone too far." Qin Huining screamed. Qin Yining shook her finger and said, "Don't say it out loud. Otherwise, people will know how vulgar you are. You'll dirty the family Qin's name." Seeing Qin Huining's flushed face, Qin Yining gave her a warm and happy smile. Then, she left with Song Lan and Bing Tang. As soon as they left Snow Pear Courtyard, they heard a loud scream from the courtyard. It was followed by the sound of slapping and the cries of maidservants. Qin Yining shook her head and sighed, "Let's go back quickly." Song Lan sighed, "I didn't expect Miss Huining to become like this. Why didn't I see that she was this kind of person before?" Bing Tang clicked her tongue and said, "Of course she's greedy." A gust of cold wind blew, carrying the fine snowflakes up to her neck. Qin Yining hurriedly tightened her collar. Rui Lan was stunned for a moment. She stomped her feet and said, "It's really snowing. I'm going to make you a pair of shoes." Bing Tang said proudly, "Shizhuan is very good at reading people's faces and the weather. Unfortunately, I've only been with her for a short time, so I've only learned simple things like reading the weather." She didn't expect Fairy Lu to have this kind of ability. She really couldn't judge a book by its cover. The three hurried back to the Shuoran Pavilion. As soon as they stepped on the steps to the porch, the raindrops mixed with the snow turned into ice particles and knocked on the roof and porch with a rustling sound. The three of them looked at each other and laughed. Qin Yining went back to her room and began to look at the account books sent by the Zhaoyun agency. She worked until late at night and then fell asleep. The next day, the news of the war between Xihua City, Dezhou, and Dian spread throughout the capital. The people, who were originally immersed in the joyous atmosphere of the new year, suddenly fell into a panic that the country was about to be destroyed. Qin Huaiyuan was kept in the palace by the emperor for several days to discuss countermeasures. He even slept in the imperial study late at night. Qin Huaiyuan couldn't go home, so the atmosphere in the house became tense. The two brothers of the Sun clan were generals guarding Xihua City. The war in Xihua City was urgent, and the Sun clan was sitting on pins and needles all day long, not to mention the situation in Duke Dingguisfu. Qin Yining advised the Sun clan, "Grandmother must be in a bad mood. Let's go to Duke Dingguisfu more often these days and accompany her to relax. Mother, please don't make grandmother worry in front of her." The Sun clan nodded and rubbed her face before saying, "I know, but I'm really worried about your eldest and second uncles. I heard that Pang Zhao's art of war is godly. I'm afraid your eldest and second uncles won't be able to hold on." "They won't. Eldest and second uncles aren't to be trifled with." Qin Yining gave Mother Jean a look. Mother Jean understood and took a cloak and sleeping bunny to serve the Sun clan. Chapter 68. Kai Ju acknowledged her words, but her steps were not fast. "Madam." Mother Jean helped Sun clan fasten the collar and gently advised, "As fourth miss said, Duke Dinggua's madam must be in a bad mood right now. Presumably, she won't be in the mood to joke with others. Why don't you just take fourth miss with you? Duke Dinggua's madam has always liked fourth miss, and fourth miss is good at counseling people. She will definitely be able to help Duke Dinggua's madam." Mother Jin's words were already very reserved. If Qin Huaining went with them, it would be enough to make Duke Dinghua's madam feel uncomfortable. How could she be comforting? Sun Clan shook his head. I don't care if she goes with us. If we don't take Sister Hui with us, Sister Hui will be sad. He waved his hand and instructed Kaiju, why aren't you going? Only then did Kaiju trot to pass on the message. Qin Yining's side was also served by Bing Tang and Song Lan. She put on a light green cloak, a white fox scarf that had just been made, and a sleeping rabbit with a ruby. She was dressed simply and elegantly. The snow-white fur contrasted with her delicate and white cheeks, making her look so delicate that it could be broken by the wind. When Sun Clan looked at her face, they could think of Qin Huaiyuan's peerless appearance in his youth. These years, Qin Huaiyuan had gradually grown older. He had grown a beard and had an air of elegance. However, he no longer had the handsomeness of his youth that made people unable to take their eyes off him. Looking at Qin Yining now, it was as if they had returned to the best years of their youth. Sun Clan smiled and helped Qin Yining adjust the sleeping rabbit. Look carefully. Sister Yi's appearance is similar to your father's, but the shape of her face and nose are very similar to mine. Qin Yining heard this and only smiled obediently. Mother Jean smiled and said, that is natural. Fourth Miss is your and Grand Preceptor's daughter. Naturally, she takes after the two of you. In this servant's opinion, Fourth Miss' temperament is very similar to Madam's when she was young. There are also the dimples on her cheeks when she smiles. The members of the Sun Clan nodded and gently tapped Qin Yining's nose. Qin Huaining brought Fu Gue and followed Kaiju into the room and saw such a warm scene. Qin Huaining felt like an outsider when she saw them all wearing the same scarf and crouching buns and holding hands intimately. She would never be able to integrate into this family. Huaining girl is here. Mother Jean smiled and bowed. Seeing that Qin Huaining was only wearing a light pink embroidered cotton cloak, she smiled and asked. This servant remembered that the fox fur scarf and sleeping rabbit were sent to Mississippi. Why isn't Miss wearing them? Qin Huaining coughed softly and said, I originally thought that such a good thing would be reserved for the new year. I didn't expect that both Mother and Miss Yi Ning would be using it. The members of the Sun Clan smiled and said, what is there to keep? If you have it, just wear it. Are you afraid that there won't be new ones to use during the new year? Qin Yining smiled and walked in front of Qin Huaining. He looked her up and down with a smile, then handed his hand warmer to Qin Huaining and said gently, Fu Gue, it's so cold today. Why didn't you think of bringing a hand warmer for your miss? And this cloak, I remember that it came with a matching guanine pouch. Why didn't you wear it? If you catch a cold, Mother's heart will ache. The members of the Sun Clan frowned and said, it's cold. Why didn't you pay attention to your clothes? Could it be that Kaiju didn't tell you that we were going to the Duke's estate? If your maternal grandmother's family saw this, it would seem that I was mistreating you. As he spoke, he turned around and ordered Mother Jean, go and bring my hood that is similar in color to Sister Hui. Yes. Mother Jean smiled and retreated. Before she turned around, she looked meaningfully at Qin Huaining. Qin Huaining held Qin Yining's hand warmer. Although the warmth was transmitted to her palms, her body was still cold. Only her heart felt like it was burning. Qin Yining was definitely doing this on purpose. Why didn't she realize that Qin Yining was such a person who was good at sowing discord? A sentence that sounded like concern made people think that she was pretending to be pitiful. But no one who heard it would think that Qin Yining was bad. Qin Huaining stiffly squeezed out a smile and said, thank you, Mother. She had learned her lesson and knew that Qin Yining was someone who could do anything. She didn't dare to cause discord with her in front of the Sun Clan. Mother Jean came to help Qin Huaining put on the guanine bib coincidentally. the little girl also came back and said that the carriage was ready. She went to report to the old madam and went to Duke Ding's estate together. Just as Qin Yining thought, Duke Ding's estate was a bit gloomy. Although eldest aunt and second aunt were smiling, they couldn't hide the anxiety in their eyes. Duchess Ding's expression didn't reveal any clues, but the Sichuan character between her eyebrows became more obvious. "It's hard for you to come back to see me." Duchess Ding's smile was very satisfied. Sister Yi said that she was worried about maternal grandmother and kept her thoughts in her heart. "I only thought of it when she mentioned it." The members of the Sun clan were straightforward. Naturally, they would say whatever was on their mind. Duchess Ding smiled and waved at Qin Yining. Qin Yining was handing the cloak to Bing Tang. When she saw this, she came forward and saluted, "Maternal grandmother." Duchess Ding looked her up and down with a smile and said, "Not bad. This white fox fur suits the complexion of a young girl. Why do I feel that your complexion is better than before? Your skin is also delicate. It's all thanks to Bing Tang's nourishment. Recently, I've been eating well and living well. My waist has become thicker." Qin Yining extended her face to Duchess Ding. "Look, my face is round." Duchess Ding was amused by her appearance and burst into laughter. Eldest aunt smiled and said, "It's not as exaggerated as you say. It's just that your face is a little chubby. As a child, I feel that you have become thinner." Second aunt also nodded, "Yes, Sister Yi should eat more, sleep more, and nourish her body. When will she become like Sister Hui?" Everyone looked at Qin Yining, who was standing with her hands hanging down. She was wearing an aqua green jacket and a magenta 8-piece skirt. She didn't look fat, but she was round and smooth. When Qin Yining stood next to her, she looked much thinner. Qin Yining smiled stiffly, but in her heart, she was cursing second aunt for being so nosy. Why did she involve her? She made it sound like she was fat. Wasn't this a way to remind everyone that she had stolen Qin Yining's good fortune for more than 10 years? Qin Yining smiled and said, "Second aunt is right. I will try my best to eat." Her words made the elders laugh again. Qin Yining was so angry that she almost bit her gums until they bled. What did she mean? Could it be that she could eat a lot? At this time, Mama Bao came in with snacks. When she heard this, she smiled and said, "Since Miss Biao said so, you should eat more mung bean cake and cinnamon sugar cake." "Yes, your mother said you like to eat cinnamon sugar cake. Eat more." Duchess Ding picked up a piece of pale yellow cake and fed it to Qin Yining. Qin Yining didn't pretend and took a big bite. Everyone laughed when they saw it. Even the members of the Sun clan, who had been frowning for a few days, felt relaxed. They thought, Mother Jean is right. In the end, Sister Yi is still the best at comforting people. Just as the atmosphere in the room was lightened, there was suddenly a burst of hurried footsteps outside. "Old Madam." The one who answered was Duchess Ding's little maid, Xiaoyao. "The Duke and eldest son are back." When they heard that Grand Aunt and Miss Biao are here, they ordered the kitchen to prepare lunch. They said that they would have lunch together later. At this time, the Duke and eldest son are in the study. Duchess Ding nodded and thought for a while before asking, "How are the Duke and eldest son's expressions?" Xiaoyao lowered her head even more and said with a trembling voice, "Answering Old Madam, this servant watched from a distance in front of the second gate." The Duke and eldest son were not very happy. She quickly raised her eyes and glanced at Duchess Ding. Duchess Ding knew that there were some words that Xiaoyao didn't dare to answer. She didn't want to make things difficult for a little maid, so she said, "Go and call Brother Ming's servant. Tell him to come over immediately. I have something to ask him." "Yes." Xiaoyao secretly breathed a sigh of relief and ran out. Not long after, a young man wearing a dark blue cotton-padded jacket and a Lyoha hat entered the door. He knelt in the outer room and saluted across the screen. "Greetings to old madam." "Luan, get up and answer." "Thank you, old madam." Luan stood up and still bowed. Duchess Ding then asked, "Did you hear what Brother Ming said today? Why are your duke and eldest son not happy?" Luan said, "This servant is not clear about the specifics. I just vaguely heard the duke and eldest son say outside the carriage that the Empress Dowager of Dezhou has a headache. She has a headache all day long and can't sleep. They said that it can only be cured by eating people's brains." This servant also heard eldest son say that the emperor seems to want to find a divine doctor to offer to Dezhou to treat the Empress Dowager of Dezhou. Duchess Ding nodded when she heard the words and said, "You can leave." "Yes." Luan saluted and left. The room fell into silence. After a long while, eldest aunt squeezed out a sentence from between her teeth. "Dezhou is really a barbarian tribe. If eating people's brains can cure a headache, then how can a cripple not be crippled after eating people's legs?" Second aunt couldn't help but worry. "I don't know how they are fighting with that group of barbarians in Xihua City. If we had known earlier that we would be worried, we really shouldn't have let second brother and fourth brother's family go." Qin Yining's eldest uncle and second uncle were guarding Xihua City. Even second cousin and fourth cousin lived in Xihua City with their families. Second cousin was second aunt's eldest son, and fourth cousin was second aunt's illegitimate son. Second cousin and fourth cousin each had a son, and now they were all in Xihua City. Thinking about it carefully, the second branch had far more people on the front line than the eldest branch. It was enough for eldest aunt to only think about eldest uncle, but second aunt thought about her husband and her son. She thought about her son and worried about her grandson, so she couldn't be at ease all day. Duchess Ding naturally knew the bitterness in her daughter-in-law's heart, so she took her hand and patted it. "Don't worry, our family has never done anything that damages our virtue. Our ancestors have accumulated virtue, so our descendants will definitely be blessed by God. They will definitely be able to turn misfortune into good fortune." Second aunt nodded and said with a smile, "Mother, you're right. Look at me, I'm worried about them. You are more worried than me, but I made you unhappy. It's really my fault. What's wrong with a kind mother's heart?" Duchess Ding smiled and ordered Mother Bao, "Tell the kitchen to prepare. Duke and the others will be back in a while. Ask the girls to come and have dinner together." Chapter 69. It didn't take long for the cousins to arrive. Qin Yining and Qin Huining went to the flower hall with their sisters to chat and laugh. Although Qin Huining was not very popular, the scene was not awkward. In the blink of an eye, it was noon. The old maid came back and asked Duchess Ding, "Old madam, lunch is ready. Should we put it in the warm room?" Duchess Ding said, "Put it in the warm room. Remember to go to the outer courtyard and ask the men to come back." "Yes." The women talked and laughed together as they went to the warm room. When they arrived at the gate of the courtyard, they happened to meet Duke Ding, who came in with his grandchildren. The girls saluted in unison. Eldest cousin Sun Yu, fifth cousin Sun Jia, and eighth cousin Sun Qin also saluted the women. They exchanged greetings with their cousins and then entered the room. The warm room was as warm as spring. The food was ready, and the fragrance of the food was appetizing. Duchess Ding said with a smile, "Remove the screen. There are no outsiders. Duke, do you want to eat alone with your 3 grandchildren? Don't you envy us for having so many people here?" Duke Ding said with a smile, "You know me well. Although I envy you, you have already given the order without me saying anything." Everyone laughed when they heard this. Duke Dinghua and Duchess Dinghua entered the banquet first and sat at the head of the table. Madame Sun sat beside Duchess Dinghua, leaving 2 seats for eldest aunt and second aunt. Eldest cousin, fifth cousin, and eighth cousin sat next to each other on the right side of Duke Ding. As for the young girls, they naturally sat at another table. Eldest aunt and second aunt held the serving chopsticks and were about to serve the dishes. Duchess Ding said with a smile, "Let's have a small reunion meal today. I don't want you to set rules. You can also sit down." The 2 sisters-in-law wanted to refuse, but Duke Ding said with a smile, "Just listen to your mother." Although Duke Dingguo was gentle, he was the head of the family. When he spoke, no one would disobey him. First aunt and second aunt also joined the banquet. Big families were particular about not talking while eating. During the meal, the slight sound of plates hitting each other could be heard. After the meal, the servants served everyone to rinse their mouths and moved them to the parlor to take a seat. The atmosphere became lively. Duke Ding stroked his beard and said with a smile, "Sister Yi, are you used to living here these days?" "Grandpa, I'm doing well. Mother is always considerate of me and takes good care of me. Huining has also taught me a lot of things that I didn't know before. Now, I can adapt to my current life," Qin Yining answered obediently. When the Sun clan heard this, they felt very comfortable. Qin Huining looked up at Qin Yining in surprise. What was she trying to do now? Duke Dingguo smiled and said, "That's good. It's your mother's blessing that you and Sister Hui are so friendly. If there's anything you need, or if you encounter any difficulties that you can't help with, just send someone to tell your grandmother." "Yes. Thank you for your concern, grandfather." Qin Yining bowed gratefully. Duke Dingguo smiled and waved his hand, indicating that she could sit down and there was no need to be reserved. Qin Yining sat down next to Qin Huining in the empty seat next to her. She looked calm and at ease, as if there was no discord between the two of them. Qin Huining's whole body was tense. As long as Qin Yining was by her side, she felt uncomfortable all over. She had to force herself not to show any clues and make a fool of herself. Although Duchess Ding was worried about the outside world, she could still keep her composure. On the other hand, second aunt was really worried about her husband and children. She couldn't help but ask hesitantly, "Father, how's the situation in Xihua City?" Duke Dingguo thought for a moment and said solemnly, "The 2 armies in Xihua City are at war. Peng Zhishi is using tricks. We haven't gained any advantage for the time being." Everyone's hearts sank when they heard this. However, second aunt comforted herself and said with a smile, "Although we haven't gained any advantage, at least our men are still safe and sound." The relatives who stayed behind could only hope for this simple extravagant hope. Duke Dingguo sighed and said, "I can only blame myself for being old. Otherwise, I would have to go to Xihua City and take down Pang Zhishi's prestige. Grandfather is old but strong. It's just that you don't need to go out for the time being," fifth cousin Sun Jia said with a smile. Eighth cousin Sun Qin frowned and said, "Actually, the war is only one part of it. What's infuriating is Dezhou's arrogance. Their Empress Dowager is sick with a cold. How could they have the nerve to send someone to inform us? Why? They invaded us and want us to find a doctor to treat the Empress Dowager. The whole world had become their families. But the emperor is actually in a hurry to find a famous doctor. This is simply..." "Eighth brother, be careful with your words," eldest cousin Sun Yu reprimanded softly. Only then did eighth cousin remember that there were other cousins around. He smiled awkwardly. Qin Yining lowered his eyes and listened to this from the side. He felt as if a big stone was pressing down on his heart. The emperor was so muddle-headed. He only knew how to be lovey-dovey with the demon empress. He even schemed against his subjects behind their backs. However, he never thought that the imperial court would band together to fight against foreign enemies. Diane, the common people had such a muddle-headed emperor. If they expected him to straighten his back and be strong, they might as well expect him to die early. Just when the room was silent, a servant's voice suddenly came from outside. Duke Dinghua, Chief Steward Wang from the palace is here to deliver the imperial edict. He's in the front yard right now. Another imperial edict. Duke Dinghua hurriedly ordered people to set up an incense table. The whole family went to the front yard to kneel and receive the imperial edict. Chief Steward Wang's expression was solemn. He slowly unfolded the bright yellow imperial edict and said in a clear voice, "By the will of the heavens, the emperor decrees, the Empress Dowager of Dezhou is ill and has found a famous doctor to cure her illness. He has consulted the Hanlin Academy's assistant lecturer, Sun Yu, who is resourceful, intelligent, and brave. He is worthy of great use. He is specially conferred the title of Accountant and rewarded with 1,000 taels of gold. He is to go to Dezhou to treat the Empress Dowager's illness. By the Emperor." The courtyard was silent. Chief Steward Wang's sharp voice was like a knife scraping through everyone's heart. Duke Dinghua's body, which was kneeling on the ground, trembled. He raised his head and said, "Chief Steward Wang, what is this?" Chief Steward Wang sighed softly and said, "Duke Dinghua, please don't blame this servant. This servant is also acting under the imperial edict. This servant will tell you the truth. You know that an envoy from Dezhou has come, right? Just now the envoy had an audience with His Majesty, saying that the great Zhou's doctor gave their Empress Dowager a prescription. To cure the Empress Dowager's headache, she must eat the brains of the smartest people in the world." Speaking of this, Chief Steward Wang also had tears in his eyes, but he held them back and lowered his voice. The envoy from Dezhou said to the emperor by name, "I heard that there is a person in your country who is very good at writing declarations. He is the smartest, so I want him." The emperor agreed. At this point, First Aunt had already fainted. Her cousins were so scared that they cried and hurriedly pinched her between her thumb and index finger. Second Aunt supported Duchess Ding, who was trembling all over. Everyone's face was as pale as a ghost. Qin Yining clenched his fists and supported the trembling Sun clan. He stared at Chief Steward Wang, who was delivering the imperial edict, and wanted to say something. At this time, Duke Dinghua only felt that his head was buzzing, and his old voice became hoarse. How can this, Duke Dinghua? The emperor has decreed that in order to appease Dezhou and protect Dian, this is also a helpless act." Chief Steward Wang sighed and held the imperial edict with both hands to Sun Yu, who had been silent all this time. "Lord Sun, please accept the imperial edict." Sun Yu's expression didn't change at all. Instead, he turned around and went to First Aunt to support his mother, who had just woken up. "Mother, don't cry." First Aunt's eyes were red, and she grabbed Sun Yu's hand hard. "Son, my son, don't go, let's not go. We can't accept this imperial edict. Don't go. You're not allowed to go." Sun Yu's eyes were filled with tears. He hugged his mother in his arms to comfort her and patted her back. Okay, mother, I won't go." However, the imperial edict had already arrived. What should they do if they didn't go? Everyone panicked. Qin Yining's mind turned quickly. He grabbed Sun Yu's sleeve and lowered his voice. "Cousin, accept the imperial edict first. Let's discuss the rest at length and then think of countermeasures." Qin Yining's face was full of tears. He also said in a low voice, "Yes. Dezhou's mountains are high and the road is long. Who would recognize what you look like? When the time comes, we'll find someone to replace you." The words of the two vaguely gave everyone hope. Yes, in the face of danger, they were all panicking. First Aunt nodded repeatedly. Yes, accept the imperial edict first. Let's think of a way. Duchess Ding and the Sun clan also breathed a sigh of relief. However, Sun Yu smiled and slowly stood up. I, Sun Yuanming, am a man of indomitable spirit. I am righteous and upright. Grandfather, grandmother, mother, I don't want to drag out an ignoble existence. He turned around and walked quickly to Chief Steward Wang. He sneered and flipped the imperial edict to the ground. Dezhou's bandits invaded my country, killed my people, and deceived my country's emperor. They want my brain to cure their illness. In their dreams. I'll smash it to pieces rather than give it to them. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly slammed into the base of the platform on the side. Immediately, with a bang, red and white splattered everywhere. Blood stained his green robe, and his thin body fell under the steps. Ah! Brother Ming. My son. No one expected Sun Yu to be so fierce. Duchess Ding, first aunt, and second aunt all screamed and fainted. The girls were so scared that they hugged their heads and cried. Some fainted on the ground. The scene was a mess. Fifth cousin and eighth cousin threw themselves on Sun Yu's body. They beat their chests and stamped their feet, crying bitterly and shouting his name. Duke Ding trembled all over. He looked at the body of his favorite grandson and the mess on the ground. Suddenly, he pulled the corners of his mouth and forced a smile. Good, good, Brother Ming, you are a man of my Sun family. You are a man with a backbone. Grandfather didn't love you for nothing. Grandfather didn't love you for nothing. Speaking of this, Duke Ding was already in tears. He threw himself on the ground and cried loudly. Chief Steward Wang wiped his tears with his sleeve and said anxiously, Duke, what should we do? If His Majesty blames us, what should we do? At this time, Duchess Ding had been woken up by Bing Tang's silver needles. She sat up with the help of Qin Yining and the Sun clan. Hearing this, she sneered. Chapter 70. This. No matter what His Majesty thinks, Lord Sun disobeyed the imperial edict is the truth. How can this servant explain this to His Majesty? After the shock, Chief Steward Wang was worried about his own life. The emperor's temperament was unpredictable. He would take people's heads if he glared at him. How could he explain this if he went back empty-handed? Come, quickly clean up Lord Sun's body and the things on the ground. Chief Steward Wang covered his nose with his sleeve and turned around to order the young eunuchs who came with him. The young eunuchs were also afraid of being angered. Although they were afraid, they still trembled and came forward to clean up Sun Yu's body and the red and white things on the ground. Sun Jia and Sun Qin angrily pushed the eunuchs away. What are you doing? He's already gone. Do you still want to make an issue out of his body? When Duchess Ding saw this, she staggered to get up, but fell back to the ground because her legs were weak. She could only shout in a hoarse voice, Don't move. I'll see who dares to touch my grandson's body. Her face was covered with tears, and she asked in grief, He's already gone. You won't even let go of his body. If you want to touch my grandson's body, you have to step over my body. Duke Ding's eyes were red, and his voice was hoarse and trembling. He spread his arms in front of the eunuchs, but his body was like a mountain, blocking everyone in Duke Ding's mansion behind him. Looking at such a miserable family, how could Chief Steward Wang not wring his hands for Sun Yu? However, if he couldn't explain it, he was afraid that he would lose his life. Duke, this servant has no choice. You know His Majesty's temper. If he really loses his temper, you and I can't bear it. After thinking for a while, Chief Steward Wang discussed again, how about this? This servant will order someone to go back to the palace to report to His Majesty, and we will listen to His Majesty's decree. If His Majesty showed mercy, it would solve his dilemma. After all, if he offended Duke Ding, he wouldn't have a good ending. Duke Ding gritted his teeth and nodded. In that case, I'll have to trouble Chief Steward. Chief Steward Wang repeatedly said, I don't dare. He hurriedly turned around and ordered a young eunuch to go back to the palace to ask His Majesty's decree. The little chamberlain didn't dare to see the emperor, but he couldn't refuse. He could only leave with a sad face. Everyone braved the cold and waited in the courtyard. It was unknown when Xiao Shui had started to float in the air. The fluttering snow fell to the ground and melted, dampening the ground. But no one wanted to avoid it. In the courtyard, only the sound of the womenfolk sobbing and crying could be heard. Eldest aunt regained consciousness. When she saw her son's miserable state, she cried until she fainted again. Second aunt and the Sun clan hugged each other and cried bitterly. Qin Yining supported his grandmother. Tears streamed down his face like a broken thread, and he couldn't stop. Eldest cousin had committed suicide to prove his sincerity. Wasn't this an accusation against the incapable ruler? It was just that the concept of loyalty and patriotism was deeply ingrained in their bones. There were many things that they could not say out loud, and they did not dare to say out loud. If they didn't say anything, they would only be using their deaths to show their sincerity. If they did, it would be seen as having the intention to rebel against their superiors. Qin Yining didn't know what the others were thinking, but she hated the incapable ruler to the core. She couldn't help but think of Qin Huayuan. Eldest cousin used to be like adding oil to the fire, fresh flowers blooming with brocade. Wasn't Qin Huayuan the same? In troubled times, the most difficult thing to predict and resist was unpredictable fate. Half an hour later, the sound of disorderly footsteps could be heard. This time, it was not only the eunuch who had just spoken, but also several Jinwu guards who were walking in front of the emperor. When the eunuch heard the emperor's decree, he bowed confidently and said, "The emperor has a verbal order." He ordered this servant to make sure to explain it clearly to Duke Ding. Chief Steward Wang nodded and motioned for the eunuch to speak. The sobbing in the courtyard gradually weakened. Everyone stared at the eunuch who had delivered the message. The emperor said, "Your Duke Ding's mansion claims to be loyal, but you're not willing to sacrifice Sun Yu for the sake of the country. It's obvious that sacrificing Sun Yu alone can quell De Zhou's anger. Perhaps Xihua City will withdraw its troops and release more than 10,000 captives. However, Sun Yu only knows how to show off his power. Not to mention killing him, even if he was chopped into 10,000 pieces, even his corpse and brain matter would be sent to the great Zhou country without any damage. Whoever dares to stop him will be charged with treason against the imperial decree." The eunuch's voice was sharp, but he also imitated the emperor's irritable tone perfectly. However, his voice was getting weaker and weaker. Because everyone was staring at him as if they wanted to eat him alive. Chief Steward Wang waved his hand and ordered the eunuch to withdraw. Duke Ding bowed and said awkwardly, "Duke, you're the head of the family. You have to understand that the emperor's words have reached this point. This servant must take him away. Think about it. Can the Duke Ding's mansion withstand the two big labels of a treason and disobedience to the imperial decree? Lord Sun is gone, but the Duke still has other children and grandchildren." Duke Ding clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white and the veins on his forehead bulged. He couldn't say a word. However, the womenfolk had already burst into tears. The Jinwu guard stepped forward and pushed away fifth cousin and eighth cousin, who still wanted to stop them. They put the red and white things scattered on the ground into a brocade box and worked together to carry Sun Yu's tragic body into a thin coffin that was temporarily prepared. Seeing that he had finally finished his task, Chief Steward Wang immediately cupped his hands and left in a hurry with his men. Duke Ding slowly raised his head and murmured, "Heaven wants to destroy De Zhou." Suddenly, he spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes rolled back and his tall body leaned back. "Grandfather! Duke!" The scene suddenly became a mess. In less than 2 hours, the news of such a big event in Duke Ding's mansion spread all over the capital. Everyone was in an uproar. Many people lamented and were shocked. Many soldiers were sad and angry. Qin Huaiyuan rushed over as soon as he got the news. Qin Yining and Qin Huining followed the Sun clan and were busy asking doctors to take care of the womenfolk in the inner residence. Not to mention Duchess Ding, first aunt and second aunt, even Duke Ding had fallen unconscious. For a moment, there was no one to make decisions about the matters of Duke Ding's mansion. Qin Huaiyuan took Sun Jia and Sun Qin to set up the lintel in the front yard. A mourning hall was set up. Sun Yu's clothes, shoes, and socks were placed in the coffin. He also ordered people to announce the death, keep vigil, burn paper offerings, and weep for the coffin. The entire Duke Ding's mansion was shrouded in white and grief. At this time, the Emperor and the Empress frowned in dissatisfaction when they saw Sun Yu's body and the scarlet mixed with white in the brocade box. Your Majesty, what do you think Sun Yuanming meant? Could it be that he didn't want to submit to you? You ordered him to do something, so he risked his life to go against you. The Empress covered her mouth and nose with a fragrant handkerchief and fanned herself in disgust. The Emperor already had such doubts in his heart. After the Empress said this, he became even angrier. We think Sun Yuanming has become stupid from studying too much. Forget it, we can only hope that he can pass the test of Dezhou's envoy. Servants. This servant is here. Chief Steward Wang smiled apologetically and bowed. The Emperor said impatiently, You personally invite Dezhou's envoy here. Tell him that we are holding a banquet and inviting him. Also, Sun Yu has already made preparations. Chief Steward Wang hurriedly bowed and retreated. The Emperor wanted to use a corpse and half a box of heart-killing objects to calm Dezhou's anger. However, when the envoy saw this, he slammed the table and stood up. He angrily criticized the Emperor, You clearly have ulterior motives towards our Dezhou's Empress Dowager. If you want to eat her raw, the fresher the better. Only when a living person is slaughtered can it be considered fresh. If such a corpse is sent over, won't it become unbearably smelly? How do you expect the Empress Dowager to consume it? The Emperor also knew this and could only smile apologetically and persuade him. The envoy angrily left without taking the corpse with him. The Emperor did not dare to act rashly in front of the envoy. After the envoy left, he flipped the table and loudly ordered Chief Steward Wang, Throw Sun Yu into a mass grave for us. We are annoyed just looking at it. Chief Steward Wang's heart skipped a beat. He quickly lowered his head and retreated to do as he was told. Fortunately, Chief Steward Wang still had some humanity left in him. Although he had left him in the mass grave, he had immediately ordered someone he trusted to deliver a letter to the Ding public house, asking them to quickly clean up the mess so that he would not be eaten by wild wolves or dogs. When Sun Jia and Sun Qin heard this, they could not help but cry again. Their eyes were red with hatred. Qin Huaiyuan said tiredly, No matter what, it is more important to bring Yuanming back and bury him. The rest needs to be discussed at length. You are not young anymore and understand many things. This is the Emperor's temperament. You are not just yourselves. Duke Ding's mansion is a big family. There cannot be any more mishaps. Uncle, you are right. Sun Jia wiped his tears and said, I will take my men and go quickly. Eighth brother, you stay here and guard. Okay. Sun Qin also wiped his face. After Sun Jia left, Sun Qin gratefully bowed to Qin Huaiyuan. Today is such a big matter. Fifth brother and I are already panicking. There is no one in charge at home. We don't know what to do. If it weren't for you, sigh. Qin Huaiyuan waved his hand, we are all family. Sun Qin nodded emotionally and said, Yes. Qin Huaiyuan sighed and exhorted, "Pass down the order. Tell everyone in the residence to watch their mouths. There are some things that can't be said out loud. His Majesty is currently in a fit of anger. If word gets out, it will be a fatal disaster." "Yes." Sun Qin pursed his lips and nodded. Qin Huaiyuan patted Sun Qin on the shoulder and said, "If the emperor wants the subject to die, the subject has no choice but to die. This is the path of a subject." Hearing this, Sun Qin looked at the spirit banner that was blown by the cold wind, and tears came to his eyes again. Sun Jia rushed to take Sun Yu's body back. Finally, it could be put in the coffin. Qin Huaiyuan looked at Sun Yu in the coffin and suddenly felt that the teeth were cold without the lips and the teeth were cold. When he thought of how talented Sun Yu was when he was alive, he couldn't help but sigh. As soon as the Sun clan side served Duchess Ding with medicine, Duchess Ding called Mother Bao to ask about the situation of Duke Ding and the outer courtyard. Mother Bao had changed into a plain dress with a white belt around her waist. She saluted and said, "Miss Tang has just seen Duke Ding. She said that he was so angry that he could only take medicine to slowly recuperate. Duke Ding woke up just now, took the medicine, and fell asleep again. The son-in-law of the outer courtyard took care of it with 5th Lord and 8th Lord. They have already put him in the coffin. You said that Brother Ming's zombie leader is back." "Yes." Mother Bao was afraid that Duchess Ding would faint again from anger, so she didn't dare to mention that she had taken Sun Yu back from the mouth of wild dogs and wolves in the mass grave. Duchess Ding only thought that the emperor had sent Sun Yu back, so she closed her eyes sadly. Because he had died a violent death, Sun Yu's coffin only stopped for 7 days before he was buried. These days, Qin Yining and Qin Huining had been following the Sun clan to take care of Duchess Ding. If it weren't for the fact that there were still 4 days until the little new year, the Sun clan wouldn't be willing to return to the family Qin. However, as a married woman, the new year was approaching, so she couldn't take root in her maternal family. Chapter 71. Something big happened to your maternal family. I shouldn't say much about you, but don't forget your identity. Although you're the daughter of the Sun family, you're a family Qin woman now that you've entered our family Qin. You have to think about the situation of our family Qin. Don't forget that your husband is the imperial tutor. Old Madam had been holding back her anger these past few days. Although a great talent like Sun Yuanming had passed away just like that, which really made people sigh and wring their wrists, Old Madam was worried that their family Qin would be implicated by Duke Ding's family. The emperor had decreed. Regardless of whether this decree was reasonable or not, an imperial decree was an imperial decree. Although Sun Yuanming's death was tragic and stirring, the crime of disobeying the imperial decree was real. On the day of the accident, when Qin Huaiyuan wanted to go to Duke Ding's residence, Old Madam stopped him. However, her son had grown up and had his own ideas, so she didn't stop him. She originally thought that Qin Huaiyuan would just go to take a look. Who would have thought that he would help the Sun family? Even when she sent someone to say that she was sick and wanted Qin Huaiyuan to come back to take care of her, he only came back to take a look. After confirming that she was just pretending to be sick, he reasoned with her and left. But who did she do this for? Thinking about it, her son wasn't the kind of person who would forget his mother after marrying a wife. Maybe the Sun clan did something or said something. Today, she finally caught the Sun clan back to the residence. How could she not lose her temper? The Sun clan was already sad. Now, she felt even more dizzy. Originally, she wasn't good at analyzing these major events. Now, her brain was like paste. She didn't think about the deeper meaning of Old Madam's words. She only felt that Old Madam was blaming her for living in her maternal family for so long. When Qin Yining saw the Sun clan's expression, he knew that she was going to lose her temper. He wanted to stop her, but he wasn't as fast as the Sun Clan's mouth. "Old madam, you're being too unreasonable. Something like this happened to my maternal family. My parents are so sad that they fell ill. Moreover, Yuan Ming's funeral hasn't been finished. How can I leave them alone? Old madam, at least put yourself in her shoes and think about it. You can't be so unreasonable." The Sun Clan's voice was a little hoarse, so when they screamed, they sounded even more hoarse. Upon hearing the Sun Clan's words, Qin Yining knew that something bad was about to happen. He hurriedly explained, "Old madam, please calm down. Mother didn't mean it that way." Old madam was so angry that she stood up and no longer listened to what Qin Yining was saying. "Are you saying that I'm being unreasonable? Is there a daughter-in-law who talks to her mother-in-law like that? I've tolerated you all these years. Do you think I'm a pushover? You're asking me to put myself in his shoes. I don't have an eldest grandson, so I really can't understand it. You." The members of the Sun Clan were trembling with anger. Her biggest regret in life was that she hadn't been able to give birth to a son for Qin Huayuan. How many times had her mother-in-law rolled her eyes at her over the years? Now, she was using this to poke at her heart. The Sun Clan's tears rolled down like beads. She covered her chest and cried until she was out of breath. "I know that old madam doesn't like me. You still want to go back to your maternal family." Seeing the Sun Clan's crying, old madam was irritated and relieved. She sneered, "Do you think that Duke Dinghua's estate is still the original Duke Dinghua's estate? Seeing that you're my daughter-in-law, I'll give you a piece of advice. Although Yuan Ming is tragic, he still defied the imperial edict. The emperor didn't punish him, so your Duke Dinghua's estate is like a knife hanging over your head. If you're really filial, you should think about your parents and brothers. You're not a young person anymore. You can't do things worse than your daughter, right? Look at Sister Hui. Look at what you've taught her. If I look at your conduct, I'll be glad that Sister Yi was swapped out early and wasn't led astray by you." Such heart-wrenching words made the Sun Clan's face turn pale. Old madam reprimanded her, but she shouldn't have said this in front of her daughter and servants. How was she going to uphold the rules in the future? The Sun Clan felt that their dignity had been trampled into the dust by old madam. Because Qin Huining's sweetheart had died in front of her, she didn't have any appetite these past few days. Her complexion was deathly pale, and she had lost a lot of weight. Now, when she heard old madam's indirect scolding, she instantly felt humiliated, angry, and helpless. It turned out that she, an outsider who had taken over a magpie's nest, had saved old madam's granddaughter. Qin Yining looked at the crying Sun Clan, then looked at old madam, who was angrily glaring at him. Then, he looked at Qin Huining, who lowered his head and endured. For a moment, he felt quite helpless. The Sun Clan's brain wasn't clear. Old madam was too snobbish. She was very good at seeking advantages and avoiding disadvantages. Qin Huining was even more sensitive and jealous now. If he let the three of them continue to stir up trouble, he was afraid that something big would happen. Qin Yining looked at Mammy Qin, who was beside old madam, for help. Mammy Qin immediately understood and nodded slightly. She patted old madam's chest and helped her to sit down. Then, she said with a red face, "Old madam, please calm down. Eldest madam is straightforward and doesn't have crooked intentions. We're all one family. Aren't you still concerned about eldest madam's family behind her back?" Then, she turned to the Sun Clan and said, "Eldest madam, don't blame old madam for speaking too fiercely. She was just speaking hastily. Old madam is still worried about the Fu. Eldest madam also knows that Grand Preceptor is in a difficult position in the imperial court now. Don't be sad. Old madam is doing this for the good of this family. Not only did she appease old Madam, but she also gave the Sun Clan a way out. If they were smart, they would go along with the meaning and apologize, and the matter would be over. However, the Sun Clan member said quickly, "I know that old Madam is thinking too far ahead after seeing that our family has committed a crime. Previously, when our family was flourishing, you all rushed to talk about marriage. Where did your enthusiasm go? Now that the master has achieved meteoric success, you all have forgotten who promoted him. When there's a matter, you want to shrink your neck. You're really heartless and unscrupulous. I don't like you." What the Sun Clan said was the truth. However, no matter how true it was, they shouldn't say it indiscriminately. Could it be that after saying these words, they wouldn't be able to live in the family in the future? Qin Yining held his forehead and hurriedly pulled the Sun Clan member to kneel down. "Old Madam, please calm down. My mother is confused because of grief. She didn't do it on purpose. Didn't do it on purpose." Old Madam's face was red. It was unknown whether it was because she was embarrassed or angry after being exposed. "If it weren't for the fact that you gave birth to such a sensible daughter like Sister Yi, I would have asked eldest Madam to divorce you today. If you don't want your son to have the reputation of flattering the strong and stepping on the weak, then come and divorce me. I've had enough of this kind of in-laws." The Sun Clan member shook off Qin Yining's hand, got up, and left. Qin Yining hurriedly chased after the Sun Clan member and pulled her back. He even gave Qin Huining a meaningful look. In any case, Qin Huining was more tactful than the Sun Clan. No matter how much she didn't get along with Qin Yining, she should know who was family behind closed doors at critical moments. In the end, they were all members of the eldest branch. When the Sun Clan caused trouble, the entire eldest branch lost face. However, Qin Yining obviously overestimated Qin Huining's intelligence and underestimated her selfishness. "Old Madam," Qin Huining knelt down. There was a layer of mist in her swollen eyes from crying these days. "Please calm down. Mother didn't mean to say these things. Mother's relationship with father is very good in private. Even if you don't look at other things, at least look at father's face and forgive her." These words were persuasion, but when used on old Madam, it was equivalent to pouring a ladle of hot oil on the fire. Old Madam doted on her son the most and had a kind of possessiveness towards him. This possessiveness was strongest on Qin Huayuan. Although she hoped that her son and daughter-in-law would be harmonious and would get angry when she saw her daughter-in-law do stupid things, in her heart, she still secretly felt that her daughter-in-law wasn't good. Only then would her son recognize who was the closest to him. Qin Huining precisely grasped old Madam's mentality. The Sun Clan didn't dote on her anymore, so why would she still speak up for the Sun Clan? There was no good person in this family at all. Sure enough, as soon as old Madam heard this, she exploded. She smashed the teapot and teacup and scolded, "I knew it was you, a stupid woman, who urged Brother Meng to stay in Duke Dinghua's mansion to help your maternal family. Don't you see what kind of situation it is now? Your nephew is dead. Don't tell me you want your husband to also be implicated." The Sun Clan had just been pulled back by Qin Yining when they heard old Madam's words. They were so angry that their faces turned ashen. Just as they were about to shout back, they felt a pain in their heart. Their vision turned black, and their body softened and fell down. "Mother! Mother!" Qin Yining caught the Sun Clan's body that had softened. The eldest Madam fainted. Mammy Qin hurriedly called someone over and ordered, "Quickly go and call the doctor." Old Madam was stunned. Was this a new trick that she had learned? Was she really fainting or faking it? Now that she fainted, was she trying to blackmail her or something? Mammy Qin had already run out at this time. "Quickly, quickly, quickly, carry the eldest Madam into the room first." The maidservants and senior servants scrambled to carry the eldest Madam. "Don't move. Qin Yining pulled away the people who were messing around and said, I've seen people who suddenly fainted. It's not good to move them after moving them. Later, the doctor said that it's because of a heart attack, so they can't move around recklessly. Quickly, go and call Bing Tang over first. The last sentence was an order to the head maidservant Ji Xiang. Just as they returned to the residence, Bing Tang and Song Lan were sent back by Qin Yining to prepare for bathing and so on. They weren't brought along. Ji Xiang hurriedly nodded and quickly left. Qin Yining anxiously pinched the perlicue and the philtrum. At this time, Qin Huining also knelt beside the Sun clan. Tears streamed down her face. Mother, don't scare your daughter. Quickly wake up. Qin Yining sneered. She didn't avoid the old madam, Mammy Qin, and the others, nor did she avoid the servants in the courtyard who were watching. She raised her hand and slapped Qin Huining. This slap was merciless. Qin Huining was in so much pain that she saw stars and fell to the ground. She tilted her head and spat out a mouthful of blood. There was actually a tooth in the blood. Ah! My tooth! You! Qin Huining, I'm telling you, it's fine if mother is fine. If anything happens to mother, I'll be the first to chop you up. You dare! Try me if you don't believe me. Qin Yining's gaze was so sharp that it scared Qin Huining so much that she trembled. She didn't dare to meet her gaze again, and her confidence weakened. How can you blame me for this? Chapter 72. Qin Yining's imposing manner scared Qin Huining so much that his face paled and he shook his head. You don't dare. What right do you have to speak like that? Who are you in this family? There's old madam, father, and mother. What right do you have to punish me? Grandmother. She wants to kill me. Quickly save me. Qin Huining was about to get up and run inside to ask for help. Qin Yining grabbed him by the collar and casually threw him aside in a seemingly relaxed manner. Qin Huining retreated several steps and fell in the middle of the courtyard. Try shouting again. His harsh words scared Qin Huining silly. She no longer dared to make a ruckus. She only knew how to cover her face and cry in grievance. The surrounding servants were all frightened and didn't dare to breathe loudly. In the courtyard, Qin Yining called out to the Sun clan in a gentle tone that was completely different from before. Mother, don't be afraid. The doctor will be here soon. Mammy Qin looked at Qin Huining and quietly entered the room. Old madam, what's going on outside? Old madam shook her head and sighed. I'm really disappointed in Sister Hui. Now that I've calmed down and thought about what happened just now, wasn't it because she mentioned Brother Meng that I was so angry that I spoke without thinking? This isn't the first time she's done this. Mammy Qin secretly thought, you're not doing anything now because you didn't see with your own eyes how fourth young miss knocked out a person's tooth. She only dared to criticize silently, but she still had to reply. It's just that Miss Huining just had a tooth knocked out by fourth young Mississippi. Ah. Old madam stood up in surprise. She could hear the noise outside, but she couldn't see the scene. Sister Hui actually knocked out a tooth. Old madam hurriedly wanted to go out. Mammy Qin held old madam's arm and said softly, Old madam, you're not feeling well today. You were also angered by first madam. You can't go out now. It won't be good if you catch a cold. I think fourth young miss has a plan and a sense of propriety. When she makes a move, won't she teach Miss Huining a lesson for you? But Sister Hui, old madam, the reason why Miss Huining dares to sow discord between us is because she has nothing to fear because of your favor. It was time to teach her a lesson and see if she would restrain herself. Moreover, don't you want to see fourth miss way of doing things? In any case, this servant really wants to see if fourth young miss will be like first old master when he was young. Speaking of Qin Huayuan was the Dowager Duchess's weakness. When Qin Huayuan was young and impetuous, he had dealt with several old concubines with thunderous methods. If anyone dared to touch her, as his son, he would be the first to be unwilling and play with them to death. Old Madam smiled. Sister Yi is very similar to Brother Mang. She takes after her father in terms of filial piety. That's right. Mammy Qin helped Old Madam sit down and said, "It won't be too late for you to make a decision after seeing the situation. Moreover, it's not like you don't care about Miss Huining. Let her learn a lesson first. It's not too late for you to help her in her hour of need." Old Madam thought about it and felt that it was reasonable. She nodded and sighed. The girl she had watched grow up with her own eyes had become such a scheming person. She even schemed against her mother, who had raised her for 14 years. Family Qin had never treated her unfairly. Her food and clothes were better than those of the girls in the Fu, but she still wasn't satisfied. It was time to teach her a lesson. While they were talking, Ji Xiang ran over with Bing Tang. After checking on the Sun Clan situation, Bing Tang took out a simple and old wooden box. He opened it and took out a long and thin silver needle. He pricked the Sun Clan's body a few times and inserted the needle into her philtrum. The Sun Clan exhaled and dazedly opened her eyes. Everyone couldn't help but exclaim, "Big Madam is awake." There were also people who didn't know the inside story who secretly praised Qin Yining's maidservant for having such amazing medical skills. "Mother. You're awake. Are you okay?" Qin Yining happily took her hand and carefully helped her sit up. The Sun Clan shook her head and leaned on Qin Yining's shoulder. Her voice was still a bit hoarse. "I'm fine. What's wrong with me?" Bing Tang smiled and said, "Madam has been too tired and sad these days. Naturally, your body can't take it. Your foundation is very good, so your body is fine. It's just that your emotions are affected. You'll be fine after resting for 2 days." The Sun Clan was still angry when she thought about what happened just now. However, she was powerless and couldn't make a fuss anymore. She could only nod her head. "Bing Tang, go tell someone to prepare a small sedan chair." As soon as Qin Yining finished speaking, Rui brought over a warm sedan chair with a sturdy female servant. She smiled and said, "Mammy Qin has already ordered this servant to prepare it. The doctor has already arrived at Xingning Garden. Big Madam, please get on the sedan chair." Qin Yining didn't ask for help. He put his hands under the Sun Clan's armpits and directly lifted her up. He then helped her into the sedan chair. He bowed and lifted the curtain of the sedan chair, saying, "Mother, go back and rest. I'll ask Bing Tang to go back with you. After I'm done with the mess here, I'll immediately go and serve you." The Sun Clan nodded and tiredly leaned against the wall of the sedan chair that was covered with a dark green velvet cloth. Qin Yining patted Bing Tang's hand and said, "Help me take care of her." Bing Tang smiled and said, "I know. Don't worry, Mississippi." After watching them leave, Qin Yining glanced at the main room that hadn't responded. He thought for a moment and a cold smile appeared on his lips. He turned around and grabbed Qin Huining by the collar and lifted her up from the ground. Qin Huining was so scared that she screamed, "What are you doing? Mother has already woken up. This is grandmother's courtyard. How dare you be so presumptuous?" Qin Yining didn't say a word. He grabbed her hair and walked out until the hairpins on her temples fell to the ground. Her hand pressed down on Qin Huining's head. Qin Huining could only follow with a bent back. She scratched wildly but couldn't catch Qin Yining. She screamed and struggled like a prey being carried by a hunter. The head maidservant Ji Xiang and Ru Yi were stunned. They had been in the Qin manor for so many years, but they had never seen such a young miss with such strange strength. The two hurriedly went into the room to report. Matriarch, fourth young miss is pulling Miss Huaning's hair and pulling her away. Matriarch finally couldn't sit still. Let's quickly go and take a look. Don't kill her. Mammy Chin was also somewhat worried. Could fourth young miss really be impulsive and chop her up? She grabbed a cloak and draped it over the matriarch's shoulders. Then, together with Ji Xiang and Ru Yi, she helped her out. Some curious maidservants and older female servants followed Qin Yining out of Ci Shao garden and followed him all the way to the back garden. It was winter now. Although the surface of the water wasn't as thick as it was in the north, there were still ice shards in the pond. Qin Yining came to the side of the lotus pond and directly threw him in without saying a word. With a plop, Qin Huaning's entire body fell into the lotus pond full of mud, remnants of lotus, and ice shards. The water wasn't deep and only reached his waist. However, Qin Huaining fell in horizontally. He was scared stiff and had the instinct to survive. When the matriarch rushed over, she only saw Qin Huaining struggling in the lotus pond and shouting for help. Qin Yining stood on the shore and sneered, "You won't die. Stand up." Qin Huaining struggled for a long time before hesitantly standing up. Only then did she realize that the water only reached her waist. She immediately became angry and embarrassed. All kinds of emotions turned into resentment. Her muddy and battered appearance was seen by second foreign, third foreign, sixth foreign, seventh foreign, and eighth foreign, who had just rushed over after hearing the news. The womenfolk were also scared stiff. Mammy Chin frowned and ordered, "What are you all standing there for? Quickly pull Miss Huaining up." Seeing that the matriarch had come, Qin Huaining had a backbone. She went up to the shore and squatted on the ground. Then, she hugged her shoulders and sobbed. She looked like she was scared stiff and only knew how to cry. Qin Yining said, "I let you go down just to wash your mouth, brain, and heart with this muddy pond." Qin Huaining sobbed even louder. "The family Qin raised you for 14 years and never treated you unfairly. Even if you're no longer the legitimate daughter, the matriarch, father, and mother have never thought of sending you back to the health hall. You don't know how to be grateful. Instead, you instigated the relationship between mother and the matriarch. Are you still worthy of being called a human?" Qin Huaining shook her head. "I know you hate me, but what crime did I commit? You were indeed innocent when you were exchanged, but what did you do? I don't hate you. You don't deserve to be hated by me. I will only kill you." Qin Huaining hugged her knees and cried until her whole body trembled. Qin Yining sneered, "You don't have to use that delicate and pitiful act. I'm a barbarian. I don't like it. Since the matriarch and all my sisters are here today, I'll say it here. If I find out that you instigated trouble and used mother again in the future, it won't be as simple as today." Was this simple? Not to mention that one of her teeth was knocked out, she was also thrown into the lotus pond to eat ice water and mud. What would it be like if it wasn't simple? "You dare." Qin Huaining finally raised her head. She was trembling like a sieve. "Don't you know whether I dare or not?" Qin Yining knelt down in front of the matriarch and said sincerely, "Granddaughter's behavior was disagreeable. I know that I was wrong. Asking the matriarch to punish me." For a moment, the matriarch didn't know whether she should punish her or not. Her appearance was 70% similar to the young Qin Huayuan. Her imposing manner of not allowing anyone to hurt her mother made the matriarch think of herself and her eldest son in the past. The matriarch also knew that Qin Huaining really needed a powerful person to deal with her. Otherwise, the inner residents might be stirred up by her. Thinking of this, she frowned and said, "Although you're reasonable, your methods are too ruthless. You threw her into the lotus pond on such a cold day. Aren't you afraid of making her sick?" She actually didn't mention that tooth. Yes, granddaughter knows her mistake. Qin Yining instantly understood the matriarch's thoughts and secretly let out a sigh of relief. Qin Huining raised her head and looked at the matriarch in disbelief. "Grandmother, don't you love me anymore? How can you treat me like this?" The matriarch looked at her miserable appearance, which was covered in dirt. She felt distressed and angry. "Sister Hui, I watched you grow up. I know what you're thinking. You're on your own." She then instructed everyone, disperse. "What are you all gathered here for?" After saying this, she actually led Mammy Qin, Ji Xiang, and Rui away. She had no intention of punishing Qin Yining at all. Second madam, third miss, and the others, who weren't clear about today's matter, now understood that Qin Huining must have done something to court disaster again. Even the matriarch wasn't willing to help her. Qin Yining bowed to her two aunts and cousins and explained that the Sun clan had fainted today and needed to immediately attend to them. The sisters were also concerned and followed Qin Yining to Xingning Garden. Qin Huining was carried back to Snow Pear Courtyard in a small sedan chair by Fugui and Kai Yun, who had rushed over after hearing the news. When the back garden quieted down, Qin Huayuan and Yu Qiyan brought their respective attendants and came out from the rockery not far behind the lotus pond. Chapter 73. Yu Qiyan looked in the direction that Qin Yining had left. His eyes were bright, and his expression was stunned. He was so stunned that he didn't hear Qin Huayuan's words. Qin Huayuan could guess a thing or two from his expression. He raised his voice slightly. "My daughter was rude. Please forgive her, Your Highness." "Ah. Oh. Imperial Preceptor, what are you saying?" Yu Qiyan's face heated up. He covered his mouth and faked a cough before saying, "Your daughter is extremely pure and filial. She is a person with a true temperament." "What's wrong with this temperament? Compared to those delicate women, your daughter is more heroic and exuberant. It's like painting a plum blossom. Only by adding strong branches can you draw out the strength of character. Your daughter's strength of character is completely based on her temperament. My daughter is naughty and mischievous. She really doesn't deserve Your Highness's praise. This subject will strictly discipline her in the future." Qin Huayuan felt that Qin Yining's conduct was too bold and unruly. It didn't conform to the rules of a noble family's young lady. Yu Qiyan anxiously said, "Imperial Preceptor, don't restrain her. There's nothing wrong with this temperament." His undisguised fondness for Qin Yining caused Qin Huayuan to involuntarily size up Yu Qiyan's expression. He saw that Yu Qiyan's fair and clear face had flushed red, and he could not help but smile knowingly. Who hasn't been young? However, after many years of being baptized by officialdom, Qin Huayuan's heart had long been wrapped up in layers of hard rock. Only when he saw such an interesting reaction from a young man would he be reminded of some memories from his youth. The two continued to walk on the stone path, one in front and one behind. They ordered their attendants to follow them from a distance. The matter of Duke Ding's mansion this time really makes one sigh. Father Emperor was scared out of his wits by Dezhou. For a moment of stability, he did anything. Although I am Father Emperor's son, I don't agree with Father Emperor's way of doing things. However, Father Emperor refuses to listen to anyone's advice. He only listens to the Empress's request. Yu Qiyan's tone was full of dissatisfaction and helplessness. Qin Huayuan naturally didn't want to get involved in the relationship between the royal father and son. He just listened in silence and didn't say anything. Yu Qiyan continued, "Right now, Dezhou's envoy has already sent a letter back to our country for several days. Presumably, we will receive a reply in less than 2 days." He didn't know what Zhou Di was going to do next. "I only hope that Imperial Father can be firm and not let down Sun Yuanming's painstaking efforts. His Majesty is wise and mighty." Naturally, He only did that because he was urged by others. The emperor was the son of heaven, and the son of heaven was wise. No matter what he did, it was not his fault. It was bound to be the fault of others. Yu Qian smiled helplessly, nodded and sighed, yes. Qin Huaiyuan said slowly, as for Yuan Ming, although he disobeyed the imperial decree, he used his own flesh and blood to once again arouse the passion of the Dayan people. This is even more shocking than the proclamation of that year. Your Highness, you must remember this line, the greatest disaster is to underestimate the enemy. Underestimating the enemy will cause one to lose one's treasure. When Yu Qian heard this, he stopped in his tracks. When the enemy forces combine forces, the one who mourns will win. This is a line from Laozi. Exactly. Qin Huaiyuan walked slowly with his hands behind his back. The saying that an army filled with grief is bound to win doesn't come out of thin air. Yuan Ming is willing to sacrifice himself to show his sincerity and also to boost our morale. If your Majesty can use this matter to make a fuss and publicize his deeds, it will definitely stimulate the morale of Xihua City's officers and soldiers. We might still have a chance of winning against Mengxi. When Yu Qian heard this, he immediately felt his spirits rise. He clapped his hands and said, "The Grand Preceptor is indeed a great schemer." Based on what you said, Yuan Ming might have already calculated this before he left. Otherwise, he wouldn't have chosen such a fierce method. I will speak to Imperial Father about this matter. Presumably, any man with a bit of courage will be encouraged. Qin Huaiyuan smiled and nodded, but his thoughts were not as optimistic as the Crown Prince's. If His Majesty really had the heart, he wouldn't have been so submissive to de Zhou's envoys. He didn't have the slightest majesty of an emperor. Not only was His Majesty scared out of his wits by de Zhou, but he didn't even consider the future. Sun Yuanming had once made a name for himself with a proclamation of war. To put it bluntly, His Majesty was cursed by the common people. However, Sun Yuanming had an indomitable spirit. Such a heroic figure had sacrificed himself because of His Majesty's muddle-headedness and cowardice in order to curry favor with the enemy country's Empress Dowager. How many people in the world were in an uproar and indignant? Qin Huaiyuan didn't think that de Zhou's physician had really prescribed a prescription to eat human brains. Zhou Di had always been crafty and cunning. This time, he was afraid that he had deliberately done this to drive a wedge between the Dayan Emperor and his subjects. However, His Majesty had jumped into the hole that His Majesty had dug without hesitation. What could they, as subjects, do? Right now, the court officials saw that de Zhou's iron hooves had already stepped into Xihua City. It could be said that everyone was in danger. They were afraid that the city would be breached and that they would be the next to be sacrificed. The Crown Prince and Qin Huaiyuan discussed how to reply to His Majesty. After remembering everything that Qin Huaiyuan had said, the Crown Prince excitedly bid farewell. Qin Huaiyuan looked at the Crown Prince's high-spirited back and shook his head. The Crown Prince was a kind and honest person. His attainments in calligraphy and painting were also very profound. With this kind of temperament, if he were to be the son of an ordinary wealthy family or the second legitimate son of a noble family, there would be no pressure. It was a pity that he was born as the Crown Prince. Qin Huaiyuan had already predicted that there was little hope that His Majesty would listen to His Majesty's advice. However, even if there was little hope, he still had to try his best. As subjects, they didn't dare to say anything. After all, the Crown Prince was His Majesty's only successor. Even if His Majesty was angry, His Majesty would at most reprimand him. At least, His Majesty wouldn't drag His Majesty out to be beheaded. Qin Huaiyuan called Qi Tai, "Go and instruct people to pay attention to the movements in the palace these days." After His Majesty and His Majesty's reply, "What is His Majesty's attitude?" Qi Tai nodded and quickly retreated. Qin Huaiyuan then returned to Xingning Garden. Enchanting Garden. The Sun clan had just seen the doctor. The doctor's diagnosis was no different from what Bing Tang said. Qin Yining was finally relieved. He helped the Sun clan lie down to rest and said, "Mother, don't get angry easily. It's harmful to your health. Is your health more important, or is it more important to be angry with others?" The Sun clan said weakly, "I'm clumsy with words. I've never been able to gain the upper hand at critical moments. Anyway, I'm bitterly disappointed." Qin Yining said with a smile, "Don't think so much. You're living with father, not with others. As long as father is sincere to you, it's fine. Think about it. How much has father helped eldest cousin in Ding general manner these days? Grandfather and grandmother both fell ill. Fifth cousin and eighth cousin didn't know what to do for a while. Isn't it all because of father's guidance and support? Father is willing to do this for Ding general manner, isn't it all for you?" Hearing this, the Sun clan felt very comfortable. There was a smile on her lips. "Are you serious?" "Of course it's true." Qin Yining nodded seriously. He took the bird's nest porridge from Mother Jean and fed it to the Sun clan while they were talking. He continued, "Father and mother were a young couple. For many years, you were deeply in love with each other. Didn't you go through a lot together? Although I've only been home for a short time, I can see that father is very considerate and respectful to you." The Sun clan had just taken the medicine and had no appetite. Hearing Qin Yining's words, she ate more than half a bowl of bird's nest porridge. Even her gloomy face gradually brightened. Mother Jean looked at her and smiled. She secretly thought that her biological daughter was still considerate. Knowing that she was thinking for her biological mother, Mother Jean also persuaded her, "Fourth young lady is right. Madam just didn't think about it because she was angry. In fact, isn't that the case? Madam is living with Master. Master is willing to dote on you. What else is so important?" The Sun clan nodded. The depression that had been suppressed for the whole afternoon had disappeared. With a smile on her face, she tapped Qin Yining's nose. "No wonder your grandmother said that you see things clearly. Isn't that the case? When we go back together, your grandmother will only dote on you and not me." Qin Yining laughed. "Grandmother dotes on me so much because she dotes on you. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't have anything to do." The Sun clan couldn't help but cover her mouth and laugh. Her complexion also returned to its normal state. Qin Huayuan stood in the corridor and clearly heard the conversation in the room. His face blushed uncomfortably. After thinking about it, he didn't enter the room and turned to leave. Kai Ju and Kai Lan, who had been ordered by Qin Huayuan not to make a sound, looked at each other and couldn't help but laugh. After the Sun clan ate the porridge and rinsed her mouth, Qin Yining and Mother Jean helped her to sleep. Qin Huaining only found out the next day that Qin Yining knocked out a tooth and threw it into the back garden's lotus pond. After listening to Mother Jin's objective description, the Sun clan looked at herself in the bronze mirror and sighed after a long time. Sister Hui is still a child. In a moment, open the storeroom and choose 2 of the new colored rulers. Send them to Sister Hui to buy new clothes. Also, invite an imperial physician to take a good look at Sister Hui. The weather is so cold, it's best if a young girl doesn't injure her foundation. Yes. Mother Jean smiled in response. However, in her heart, she secretly approved of the 4th young Miss actions and felt incomparably carefree. Such an ungrateful ingrate was clearly a troublemaker. If he didn't punish her properly, she might really become the root of the family's mess. Only someone as powerful as the 4th young Miss would be able to control her. Putting aside the fact that Qin Huaining had caught a cold and was bedridden, the old matriarch and the Sun clan's hearts ached. On the day of the Little New Year, when everyone was jubilant, the crown prince was punished to kneel in front of the imperial library for 4 hours. He was so cold that he fainted. Only then was he allowed by the emperor to be carried back to the eastern palace and grounded. This news quickly spread throughout the imperial court. Along with this news, de Zhou's emperor, Li Qitian's letter of credence also spread. No one knew how de Zhou did it, but the letter of credence was like an imperial notice. In one night, it was plastered all over the streets of the capital and the nearby towns. It was written with bold words, angrily denouncing the Yan dynasty's emperor for having ulterior motives. As long as one's brain matter was given to the Empress Dowager of de Zhou, he wouldn't even accept it. There was no sincerity in peace. It even threatened to flatten the Dayan and capture the emperor to be put to death by 1,000 cuts. The common people were afraid, angry, cursed the incapable ruler, and cursed de Zhou. All kinds of opinions were spread. When the emperor heard the news, he was so scared that his face turned pale. He first wrote a letter of apology and ordered people to quickly send it to de Zhou. Chapter 74. The ancient city walls of Xihua City stood tall in the middle of a vast expanse of land. The city walls stretched as far as the eye could see, like a giant with its arms outstretched, embracing all of Xihua City's soldiers and civilians. In de Zhou's military camp, which was 50 li outside of the city, dozens of flags fluttered in the wind. The black flags were embroidered with golden threads of a fierce tiger baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, as if it could pounce at any time and tear its prey into its stomach. This was the military flag of the Tiger Army, led by the Grand Marshal of de Zhou's armed forces, Prince Zhongshuan Pang Shao. The large flags with the word swastika on a red background and black characters fluttered in the wind along with the military flags. Inside the military camp, everything was in order. Only the drill ground was filled with noise and excitement. Good. Marshal Feng is so skilled. Wang Eru, are you a freeloader? 4 people against 1 marshal. If you still lose, you'll have to share your steamed buns with your brothers tonight. In the drill ground, 4 burly northern men with broad shoulders and round waists were bare-chested. They were sweating so much that white steam rose from their bodies in the cold wind. Their bodies were covered in dust, and they were all eager to fight. They surrounded a similarly bare-chested, muscular young man. Even though they had already been beaten twice, the 4 of them were still unconvinced. They didn't believe it. The 4 of them were men who could stand on their fists and walk on their arms. They might not be a match for the marshal in martial arts, but how could the 4 of them lose to the marshal in wrestling? Marshal Feng was strong, but he was also a skinny man. People always said that one's strength was not a disadvantage. They didn't believe that they would lose this time. The 4 of them roared at the same time and rushed forward. The sweat on Pang Zhao's forehead slid down, and white steam rose from his forehead in the cold wind. His eyes flashed with excitement as he quickly met the attack. Marshal is so mighty. You guys should give it your all. The surrounding soldiers weren't afraid of the drama and shouted excitedly. Huzi and Jingpei, whose beard were fluttering in the wind, were watching the battle from the side, shouting and cheering for Pang Zhao. Jingpei had a thick overcoat draped over his shoulders. He looked at Pang Zhao with a faint smile. The crow's feet at the corners of his eyes and the smile lines at the corners of his lips made this old man in his 60s look exceptionally loving. The outcome of the battle was quickly decided. Facts had proven that wrestling was not all about strength, it was also about technique. Pang Zhao reached out and pulled up the men who had been knocked down by him. He laughed heartily and said, "I'll give everyone an extra meal tonight. Let's eat meat today." Good. Everyone cheered. Every man looked at Pang Zhao with eyes full of enthusiasm and worship. Pang Zhao laughed heartily and chatted with the soldiers for a while before he wiped his sweat and walked towards Huzi. Huzi immediately took Pang Zhao's clothes and a large towel to welcome him. Master, you were so awesome just now. Xingpei also smiled and put the clothes on Pang Zhao. Little Wang Yi, you have to take care of your body. If you don't take care of yourself when you're young, what will you do if you get sick when you're old? Pang Zhao casually wiped his sweat with the large towel and tied his belt as he walked towards the tent. Mr. Zheng, you don't have to worry. We're used to living in the north. We really don't feel cold in the Yan dynasty's territory, let alone when we exercise. That's right. Master was so mighty just now. When can I train to be like you? You're so mighty that I feel embarrassed to be your bodyguard. Huzi's eyes shone brightly. After entering the tent, Pang Zhao drank a large bowl of water and felt that his sweat had dissipated. He neatly put on his black battle robe and tied his hair tightly with a belt. The neatly dressed man had a heroic and noble air about him. He was a completely different person from the straightforward and rough man from before. Xingpei nodded in satisfaction. Pang Zhao wasn't good at hiding his emotions when he was young. Whether he was happy or not was written all over his face. After so many years of experience, he could change his aura at will. When he was needed to be a rough man, he would be a rough man. When he was needed to be awe-inspiring, he would be awe-inspiring. When he was needed to be unreasonable and shameless, he would not hesitate. It was just that he was always too lazy to speak in front of others. Reporting. Someone outside the tent replied loudly. Come in. Reporting to the marshal, there's news from Xihua City. The Yan dynasty's emperor urgently summoned the two generals' son and their families back to the capital. He's replaced them with a general named Wang Hui. Pang Zhao heard this and waved his hand, indicating for the soldier to leave. When there was no one else in the tent, Xingpei smiled. It seems that your Majesty's plan worked. The Yan Emperor is really scared out of his wits. Huzi said, I think that dog Emperor is a complete idiot. He's greedy for life, afraid of death, and has no brains. It's a pity that Sun Yuanming. Although he once spoke disrespectfully, it was only because he was on a different side. As a weak scholar, he has such integrity. He's a good man worthy of respect. Master, don't you think so? Pang Zhao nodded and said, it's a blessing that he left first. Huzi made a puzzled sound. Xingpei thought for a moment and then explained, little Wang Yi is right. The Yan Emperor is muddle-headed, paranoid, and as timid as a mouse. After reading your Majesty's letter of credence, he must be scared to death. Their Yan dynasty has few talents and their treasury is empty. There's no one who can fight little Wang Yi. The only thing they can do is try their best to make peace. Make peace. Huzi blinked and then understood. He stared and said, Mr. Jing, you mean that the Yan Emperor will make an example of the Sun family? Yes, we want Sun Yuanming's brain. Sun Yuanming refused to give it to us. The Yan dynasty's emperor was not only reprimanded by your Majesty, but also threatened. This simple-minded idiot will definitely think of using the Sun family to appease your Majesty's anger. This idiot. Huzi laughed. It's better if he kills all the capable ones. Let those people in their country hate him to death. Listening to the excited conversation between Xingpei and Huzi, Pang Zhao thought of the person related to the Sun family. Her family had suffered such a great disaster. Her life in the future should be affected. Pang Zhao was worried about Qin Yining. Even if she was the daughter of his enemy, in his heart, she was always special. Xingpei was a shrewd person. Seeing Pang Zhao's expression, he smiled and asked, what is little Wang Yi thinking about? Then he asked jokingly, could it be that little Wang Yi is thinking about that girl from the family Qin family? Pang Zhao leaned lazily on the round-backed chair. He smiled and raised his eyebrows at Jingpei with a sharp gaze. Jingpei felt as if he had lost a piece of flesh from Pang Zhao's glare, but because he was Pang Zhao's strategist, and could be considered half of Pang Zhao's master, he had watched Pang Zhao grow up with his own eyes. Therefore, he did not mince his words. Little Wang Yi, there are many beauties in the world. With your talent, what kind of woman can't you want? Why are you always thinking about Qin Meng's daughter? Could it be that little Wang Yi likes her? When has this king ever said that he likes her? Then what does Wang Yi mean? This king doesn't know yet. He doesn't know. Jingpei frowned. Pang Zhao said bluntly, it's because this king doesn't know how he feels about her that he wants to quickly defeat the Yan dynasty. When the time comes, he can keep her by his side and slowly think about it. Huzi stared at Pang Zhao, flabbergasted. You've obviously taken a fancy to her. You already treat her hair clip as a treasure. What else is there to think about? Jingpei's expression was very ugly. Little Wang Yi, don't forget how Wang Yi died back then. If it weren't for that bastard Qin Meng, the Pang family wouldn't have ended up like this. When two armies are facing each other, their standpoints are different. No one dies in battle. Pang Zhao tapped the table with his index finger. Although Qin Meng is abominable, isn't it the people who should be blamed the most for suspecting my father? Jingpei pursed his lips and didn't say anything. Indeed, if the incapable emperor hadn't been suspicious and used a loophole to sow discord, how could the Pang family really be put to death? To put it bluntly, Pang Zhongjing's achievements back then were so great that the emperor was afraid of him. Besides, didn't Mr. Jing already take revenge on Qin Meng back then? Pang Zhao said again. Jingpei raised his voice. We just stole a girl. I don't think Qin Meng was very sad. How is that revenge? We wanted to take revenge back then but didn't have the ability, so we had to do this. Now that we have status and power, we can crush them at any time. Naturally, we shouldn't let Qin Meng go. Pang Zhao was angry, but he smiled. Since you know that you will take revenge on Qin Meng in the future, why do you want to make an example of an innocent person? Jingpei was speechless for a moment. Just then, a sharp and hoarse voice came from outside the tent. Grand Marshal Pang, I come with your Majesty's secret edict. It was Jianjun Liu. The Emperor of Zhou had sent the head eunuch, Lu Yuan, to supervise the troops. Huzi smiled and went to invite Jianjun Liu in. Military supervisor Liu was in his early 30s. He had a medium build, a delicate and pretty face, and no beard. He bowed slightly to Pang Zhao and respectfully saluted him. He presented the secret decree sealed in wax to Pang Zhao with both hands, and smiled flatteringly. Pang Zhao glanced at Jianjun Liu, opened the envelope, and took out the note inside. There were only 2 words on it, massacre the city. Pang Zhao's expression didn't change. He put down the note. Huzi and Jingpei had been paying attention to what was going on. When they saw the 2 words on the note from the corner of their eyes, their hearts skipped a beat. Pang Zhao thought for a moment and asked, is the person who delivered the edict still here? Replying to little Wang Yi, the person has already left. This king understands. I'll have to trouble army supervisor to make this trip. I don't dare. Jianjun Liu smiled and bowed, then respectfully retreated. As soon as he left, Jingpei clapped his hands and said with a smile, Your Majesty's brilliant plan. This way, the anger of the people of the Yan dynasty will definitely rise to another level. Pang Zhao pointed in the direction of Xihua City and asked with a smile, how many people are there in the city, women, and children, and the real soldiers? This was a question that already had an answer. The spies of Dezhou had already investigated the number of soldiers, citizens, and provisions in Xihua City. Jingpei immediately understood what Pang Zhao meant. He disagreed and said, "Little Wang Yi, don't be soft-hearted. Besides, a secret edict is still an imperial edict." Chapter 75. Little Wang Yi. Xing Pei was so angry at Pang Zhao's words that his face and ears turned red. He stomped his feet and said, "You can't be so impulsive. You have to consider the overall situation. It's not easy for you to have your current position. Moreover, it's time for you to repair your relationship with your Majesty. If you don't listen to your Majesty's decree, do you know what your Majesty will think? What will your colleagues in the court think? When your Majesty conquered Northern Ji, the ministers who surrendered to us in Dezhou all hate you. If you take this opportunity to slander your Majesty, I'm afraid you won't be able to maintain your position in your Majesty's heart. What will you do at that time?" When the Zhou Emperor conquered Northern Ji, Pang Zhao was the vanguard. Pang Zhao did all the killing. In addition, he was ruthless when he avenged his father. In the hearts of many old ministers of Northern Ji, Pang Zhao was the main culprit who conquered Northern Ji. Although these people surrendered to the Zhou Emperor and some continued to be officials in the court, they hated and feared Pang Zhao in their hearts. It was inevitable that they would do some shady things behind his back. For example, Pang Zhao's reputation was as famous as his military prowess. Some of it was the work of these people. This king understands. Pang Zhao had already calmed down. His voice was firm as he said slowly, "A real man has things to do and things not to do. What's more, this prince is now a sharp blade that can be used. Sooner or later, there will be a day when this prince doesn't fit. Even if this prince disarms and returns to the fields now, do you think that the so-called status, relationship with colleagues, and the instigation of the surrendered subjects will disappear?" Xing Pei was speechless for a moment. He always knew that Pang Zhao was not stupid. He could see many things clearly, but his way of dealing with it was completely different from what he thought. "Teacher, you also think that nothing will change, right? Since it's not beneficial to the situation, why should this king be afraid of the slightest thing? A general success is built on 10,000 corpses." This saying was true. But this king does not need the bones of women and children to build this king's glory, splendor, and wealth. "Little Wang Yi, you're too stubborn." Xing Pei thumped his chest and stamped his feet. He paced back and forth, his face flushed red with anxiety. Spittle flew everywhere as he said, "You're walking on the same path as Wang Yi. I know you have a kind heart and don't want to hurt the innocent, but sometimes what you do doesn't depend on your own will, but the situation forces you to do it. If you disobey the decree, you will be ruining your Majesty's plan. Your Majesty will definitely remember this. Let him be. This king cannot do something that he will regret for the rest of his life because of a moment of fear. This life is very short, especially for a person like me whose head is pinned to his belt. It's a short life to begin with. If I can't live according to my own wishes, then what's the difference between me and a captive animal?" Pang Zhao picked up the weasel hairbrush and motioned for Huzi to grind the ink. Huzi listened to Pang Zhao's words and agreed with his idea. Therefore, he ignored Xing Pei's objection and went to serve Pang Zhao the brush and ink. Pang Zhao thought for a moment and then wrote a secret letter in a flourish. It didn't take long for him to finish writing it. Xing Pei read the contents of the letter and anxiously scratched his ears and cheeks. "Do you still want your future career? Disobeying the decree is a crime punishable by death. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. There will definitely be a warning. Holding grudges and guessing are not something that can be done in a day. But I won't lose my life. Go outside and ask around. Who do Dezhou's soldiers and Tiger Army recognize? Little Wang Yi, you're simply relying on your military achievements and military power to be fearless. That's right. Anyway, I have military power in my hands. Even if I don't have any thoughts, I'll still be suspected. If I have this ability, why shouldn't I use it? Pang Xiao casually tossed the brush aside and ordered Huzi, go and get someone to send this letter to your majesty as fast as possible. Huzi nodded and quickly walked out. Jing Pei angrily slapped his thigh. Little Wang Yi, you don't care about your career at all. Indeed, I don't care. This time, Pang Xiao didn't call himself this king. Instead, he confided in Jing Pei. I will never do anything that harms innocent people. Otherwise, I won't be able to raise my head when I meet my father in the netherworld. My mother, grandfather, and grandmother always despise my hands for being covered in blood. This time, even if it's for their sake, I won't agree to slaughter everyone in the city. Jing Pei's lips moved. After a long time, he sighed. Little Wang Yi, aren't you walking down the same path as Wang Yi? You have to remember how Wang Yi was hated back then. Don't forget what happened in the past. You'll be a teacher for the future. I was born as a human, so I should be a human. I won't do anything that doesn't deserve to be a human, even if a knife is held to my neck. Jing Pei looked at Pang Xiao's sparkling phoenix eyes. In the end, he just nodded and sighed again. At this time, Qin Yining and the Sun clan were preparing to go to Duke Dinggua's estate. The emperor urgently summoned his eldest uncle, second uncle, 2 older cousins, and their families to the capital. The Sun clan thought that they would at least be able to see their 2 older brothers, so they wanted to bring Qin Yining over for them to take a look. Qin Yining was already dressed properly. Together with Mother Jean, he served the Sun clan and put on a warm fox fur hat. When he saw the joy in the Sun clan's eyes, he couldn't help but remind them in advance. Mother, the situation in Duke Dinggua's estate is tense right now. When we go see eldest uncle and second uncle later, we must use our brains and observe the situation. Also, we need to be more tactful when we speak. After all, eldest cousin just passed away, and eldest uncle is still grieving. The Sun clan didn't take Qin Yining's words to heart. Even if they listened, they didn't understand the deeper meaning. They only said, I know. I haven't seen your eldest uncle and second uncle for many years. I also miss them very much. I don't know how sad they will be when they find out that Brother Ming is no longer around. Qin Yining saw that the Sun clan didn't grasp the main point, so he didn't say anything else. She always felt that the situation wasn't good for her eldest uncle and second uncle to be urgently recalled to the capital. She reminded the Sun clan because she wanted her to pay attention to any abnormalities. If there was a situation, she could immediately think of a solution. When the carriage was ready, Qin Yining and the Sun clan left with Mother Jean and Bing Tang. They first went to Xi Shao Garden to explain the situation to the old madam. After all, the little New Year had just passed, and the family was busy preparing to welcome the new year. Qin Yining smiled and explained that they would be back soon. Seeing Qin Yining's sincere request, the old madam nodded. The carriage drove all the way to Duke Dinggua's estate. Unexpectedly, just as they turned into the long street where Duke Dinggua's estate was located, they saw the estate's gate open from a distance through the carriage window. Soldiers wearing armor and eunuchs wearing gray clothes were escorting a middle-aged man in his 50s, who was wearing a black sable coat and had a medium build, out of the main gate. Qin Yining saw that the situation wasn't right and hurriedly ordered the driver to stop the carriage. Don't get close. Quickly, back into the alley. Hearing this, the coachman hurriedly obeyed. The Sun clan anxiously said, What's going on? Who dares to trespass into Duke Dinggua's estate? Mother, let's watch from afar first. Don't make a sound. The Sun clan also knew that the situation was serious, so they nodded. Not long after, heavily armed and armored soldiers escorted many people out. The first person in the lead was Duke Dinggua, who was wearing a dark blue brocade robe. Qin Yining didn't recognize the two men behind him, but he was sure that they were his eldest uncle, Sun Hai, and second uncle, Sun Hai Jing. Behind them were four young men. Among them, Qin Yining knew fifth cousin and eighth cousin. There were also two slightly older men, who should be second cousin and fourth cousin. Behind them, there were a few boys. The older ones were 7 or 8 years old, and the younger ones were still being carried by servants. They were only 4 or 5 years old. All the men were tied up and tied into a string like dumplings. Behind the men were the womenfolk and maidservants who were also tied up in a string. What's going on? The Sun clan trembled in horror. Duke Dinggua's estate has been raided. Mother, let's go back and ask father about the situation. Qin Yining pressed the Sun clan's mother down and hurriedly ordered the coachman. Chapter 76. The Sun clan had never seen such a frightening scene in their entire lives. They were stunned for a moment, and then their hoarse and sharp voices seemed to be squeezed out of their throats. They anxiously slapped the carriage wall. Stop the carriage. Stop the carriage. Let me see what's going on. Qin Yining saw this and hurriedly supported the Sun clan. Okay. Mother, don't worry. Let's see what's going on. Once we understand, we can go back and discuss with father how to solve this. Mother, you must calm down. Yes, madam. Fourth young miss is right. We must remain calm. Mother Jin's forehead was covered in cold sweat. Bing Tang's face was pale. She gritted her teeth and said, I don't know what kind of trouble the incapable ruler is going to cause. The carriage stopped, and several people lifted the curtains and squeezed to look outside. At this time, the matter at Duke Ding's estate had already alarmed the passers-by and the servants of the nearby neighbors. Many people gathered around. Some were simply there to watch the show, while others were full of doubts and indignation. Everyone's discussion was buzzing. They were all wondering how the Duke Ding's estate had fallen to the point of confiscating property after the funeral of his grandson. Qin Yining saw that there were so many people, so he and Mother Jean helped the Sun clan out of the carriage. Several people wore cloaks and hoods tightly and hid behind the crowd to watch from afar. The wide-open door of the estate had been closed with a bang, and the soldiers had put a seal on the door. The masters and servants in the estate were all driven out and tied up in several rows like mules and horses. Duchess Ding, eldest aunt, second aunt, and several masters dressed as daughters-in-law were tied up in a row. Everyone tried their best to support the two pregnant women in the middle. Among them, the pregnant woman was fifth cousin's wife, and the pregnant woman was eighth cousin's wife. But even with the support of the people beside them, the two of them didn't look very good. Fifth cousin and eighth cousin, who were standing in the front row, were so anxious that they frequently turned back to ask questions. When the soldiers saw this, they first looked at a man in his 50s who was wearing a black sable fur cloak. Seeing him pouting his lips, the soldier understood and swung his scabbard at fifth cousin and eighth cousin a few times. Immediately, there was a big cut on their heads and faces, and blood flowed down along their cheeks. Confiscating property. Who allowed you to speak? Ah! Stop hitting them. The womenfolk screamed. Don't touch my grandson. Duke Ding roared and used his body to push those people away. Although his hands were tied behind his back, he was like a towering mountain, in front of his grandson. First uncle and second uncle angrily kicked and knocked the soldiers who had attacked them to the ground. The crowd suddenly became chaotic, and the onlookers were also pointing and whispering. Hit you. Hit is a light punishment. Chao Bingzhong. How dare you let people? It turned out that the leader was Chao Guozhang. His Majesty has entrusted this matter to me. What I do is entirely up to me. But, you. Why are they like quails waiting to be slaughtered now? After a moment of silence, someone mustered the courage to say indignantly, what crime did Duke Dingwo commit? Yes, why do they want to confiscate Duke Ding's property? It must be the Demon Empress who instigated it. This person is the Demon Empress' father. He is not a good person. When someone spoke, someone else agreed. Although people had the heart to seek benefits and avoid harm, once their emotions were stirred up, they would not care so much about what they said. What's more, the law did not punish the majority. These people did not do anything heartless. They just whispered. They did not believe that these people could arrest them. Chao Guizhong glared at the crowd angrily. The soldiers immediately understood and went forward to push the crowd. Shut up. Do you all want to be buried with them? Several people in front were pushed, and the people behind were also squeezed. Qin Yining and Mother Jean supported the Sun clan, and Bing Tang supported Qin Yining. The four of them supported each other, but they were still pushed to the ground. Seeing the soldiers take action, the common people quieted down. Chao Guizhong raised the corner of his mouth and said mockingly, Sun Diqing, do you think you still have the right to speak now? Your residence is full of traitors and traitors. The emperor is already furious. Do you still want to incite the common people to cause chaos? Turning around, Chao Guizhong said loudly to the common people, Dezhou originally extended an olive branch to us. As long as Sun Yuanming was willing to offer his brain to treat the Empress Dowager of Dezhou, perhaps our crisis could be resolved. However, the good grandson taught by Sun Diqing actually disobeyed the emperor's decree. The emperor has not investigated the crime of disobeying the emperor's decree. Now, Dezhou is furious. Prince Zhongshuan's tiger army is pressuring the border. If they really break into Xihua City, how can the common people of the capital city be safe? This is all caused by Sun Diqing and his family. Bah! Shameless! He is obviously an incapable ruler who is greedy for life and afraid of death. The crowd whispered. Qin Yining and the Sun clan were in the crowd, so they heard it clearly. Chao Guizhong didn't care at all. He looked at Duke Dingguo's family and said, the emperor has no other choice. Dezhou's national letters are everywhere. For the sake of the common people of Dian, he can only punish your family. I don't believe it. Even if the emperor wants the lives of my Sun family, I want to hear the emperor's decree. I don't believe that our Sun family is full of loyal officials. My grandson has shown his ambition for the country. My son has fought on the battlefield. In the end, this is the outcome. You want to hear the emperor's decree. But the emperor won't see you. Duke Dingguo's face turned purple. Chao Bingzhong, you treacherous villain. You taught your daughter to seduce the emperor and specially instigate the emperor to do improper things. You are also a traitor to the country. Aren't you afraid of retribution? Ha ha ha. Chao Guizhong laughed loudly and clapped his hands. My retribution hasn't come yet, but yours, Sun Diqing's, has. Then, with a serious face, he raised his voice and said, Son, you disobeyed the emperor's decree and offended his superiors. Duke Dingguo's family is disloyal and instigated the relationship between the two countries. Dezhou and Dian can't be at peace. All the men of Duke Dingguo's mansion, regardless of age, are to be beheaded and executed 3 days later at noon. The women are to be sold to the musical house immediately. The servants of Duke Dingguo's mansion will be sold at the end of the long street in 3 days. All the property under Duke Dingguo's name will be confiscated and confiscated. After a moment of silence, the scene suddenly became noisy. Duke Dingguo was stunned in place. Duchess Dingguo's eyes were blank for a moment, and then she screamed, No! Eldest uncle shouted, Your Majesty! You can't be blinded by treacherous officials. I, Sun Haijin, have fought for the country all my life. My son is loyal and full of enthusiasm for serving the country. But you want my son's brain to sue for peace. Now you want the lives of my whole family. My youngest nephew is only 5 years old. Your Majesty. The child is innocent. Please have mercy, Your Majesty. Even if Duke Dingwa's family is not favored by the Emperor, what does a 5-year-old child know? We don't deserve to die. Your Majesty, please leave a trace of the Sun family's bloodline. The sad cries of eldest uncle and second uncle caused an uproar among the people, and they all loudly scolded the incapable emperor. Chao Guozhang sneered, Your Majesty is wise. It's true that you have disloyal hearts. Look, you can incite ignorant people to scold the emperor with just a few words. He waved his hand casually, and several eunuchs and soldiers rushed to the crowd. They grabbed the young man who had shouted the loudest just now and chopped him with a knife. This knife cut the young man's neck. Blood splashed high, and the body fell to the ground with a plop. The crowd immediately fell silent. Chao Guozhang turned to look at the onlookers. If anyone talks nonsense again, he will be guilty of treason. How could the people dare to speak again? None of them dared to speak out. Duke Dingwa's eyes were red, and 2 lines of tears gushed out. Your Majesty, you betrayed my Sun family and Dian's loyal officials. Your Majesty, aren't you afraid that your officials will be bitterly disappointed? Shut up. Put the men in the prison of the Ministry of Justice, and send all the women to the musical house. Take them all away. Yes. Master. Duchess Ding choked with sobs. Duke Dingwa looked back at his old wife. They all knew that after this farewell, they would never see each other again. Paisian, I'm sorry for you. No, Master, you are a hero, a good man. I'm satisfied to be able to follow you all my life. Duchess Ding choked with sobs. Eldest aunt, second aunt, and several cousin-in-laws all crazily called for their husbands, and the 2 sides struggled to get close to each other. Eldest uncle and second uncle fell to their knees with tears in their eyes. Because they were tied into a string, the men all knelt down together with them. Your son is unfilial. Farewell, mother. Eldest uncle and second uncle saluted, and several cousins also kowtowed to eldest aunt and second aunt. Eldest aunt wailed, and second aunt roared crazily. It was hard to hear what she was saying, but she was half crazy. Among the men who were beheaded, her second branch had the most people, and among them was her 5-year-old grandson. This heart-wrenching scene caused an uproar among the onlookers once again. The Sun clan couldn't hold it in anymore. They shook off Qin Yining and Mother Jin's hands like crazy, pushed through the crowd, and rushed forward. Father. Eldest brother. Second brother. Qin Yining and Mother Jin also rushed out. Seeing that the soldiers wanted to stop the Sun clan, Qin Yining was afraid that the Sun clan would be at a disadvantage, so he stood beside the Sun clan and used his arms and back to block the soldiers' push. However, the 3 of them were still blocked by the soldiers and couldn't move an inch. Duke Dingwa, eldest uncle, second uncle, and the cousins all turned their heads and looked at the Sun clan and Qin Yining with tears in their eyes. Grandfather, eldest uncle, second uncle. Since they had already shown their faces, there was no point in hiding anymore. Qin Yining knelt on the spot and saluted. Duke Dingwa looked at Qin Yining and the Sun clan and didn't say anything. Eldest uncle and second uncle cried and laughed. This is Sister Han's daughter, right? Take good care of your mother. Eldest uncle, second uncle, don't worry. Qin Yining supported the Sun clan. The Sun clan's forehead was pressed against the bluestone tiles, and she sobbed loudly. Father, I don't want you to die. Eldest brother, second brother, I don't want you to die. Chao Guozhang first glared at the Sun clan and Qin Yining, but because the Sun clan was already married and her husband was Grand Preceptor Qin, he didn't dare to move. He only ordered in a deep voice, "What are you waiting for? Take them away." After saying that, he got into the carriage and left first. When the soldiers and eunuchs heard this, they were about to separate the women from the men and take them away, one on the left and one on the right. Finally, they were about to leave, and their tightly clenched hands were about to be forcefully separated. Duke Dingwa looked at his old wife expectantly and said, "Paisian, take the children and live on." Duchess Dingwa's eyes were covered with tears, and she nodded hard. Fifth cousin shouted anxiously, "Grandmother, please take care of Shuang. Shuang, don't cry. Give birth to our child and live well. Husband, husband." Fifth cousin's wife held her belly that was about to give birth and refused to let go of fifth cousin's hand. In the chaos, she was pulled by the soldiers and fell to the ground. She covered her belly and cried out in pain. She was forcibly dragged away, leaving a trail of blood on the ground. Fifth cousin's eyes were about to pop out. His child. Qin Yining couldn't stand it anymore. She pushed the soldier who was blocking her to the ground. No one expected that a young lady would have so much strength. Someone wanted to draw his sword, but he was stopped by an informed eunuch. "This is the young lady of Grand Preceptor Qin's family." However, these people didn't dare to draw their swords, but there were still 3 or 4 strong men who stopped Qin Yining and didn't let him get close. Qin Yining had to say loudly, "Cousin, don't worry." Hearing this, Duke Dingwa, first uncle, second uncle, and several cousins all looked at Qin Yining. There were tears in Qin Yining's eyes, but his eyes were very firm. "I'll go to the musical house right now." Zhao Yun Agency, which specialized in renting convicts from the musical house, was now Qin Yining's industry. Duke Dingwa smiled and nodded heavily. Qin Yining also nodded. Finally, he looked at fifth cousin and eighth cousin and turned to leave. Chapter 77. Qin Yining rushed to Madame Sun, who was kneeling on the ground and crying, and helped her up by force. "Mother, you go home first. I'm going to lodge a complaint. I'm going to the Ministry of Justice's prison." Why? Sun Clan sobbed and shook her head. "Because it's an imperial edict. The imperial edict was issued by His Majesty." "Who are you going to lodge a complaint with?" Qin Yining held Sun Clan's shoulders with both hands. He exerted a little force and lowered his voice. Every word seemed to be squeezed out from between his teeth. "Mother, the imperial edict has been issued, and it can't be reversed. We're just women, and we're also members of the family Qin. Our actions will affect the life and death of our family Qin. Mother, do you want everyone in the family Qin to be buried with grandfather and the others? How can you be so cold-blooded?" Sun Clan looked at Qin Yining in disbelief and pushed her with both hands. "Do you want me to watch your grandfather and the others die?" This time, Qin Yining stood firmly in the same place. He didn't let go of Sun Clan's strength like before. Instead, he tightly held Sun Clan's shoulders with both hands. She was in so much pain that she frowned and even forgot to cry. "Yes, perhaps I'm cold-blooded. Although I grew up in the mountains all these years, I also survived in the marketplace when I was young. I've experienced real life and death and seen the good side of human nature. But more than that, I've seen the true and ugly side of human nature. Disaster is imminent. Even if my father has the intention to help Ding General Manor, is His Majesty someone who will listen to advice? Mother, think about it. Father is also the pillar of the family. Will he go against the rules and put his family on the fire to roast? My father is the imperial tutor of the dynasty, but he can't do it. Mother, a noble lady, how can you do it? If you do anything now, you'll only be putting your family Qin in danger. The members of the Sun clan stared blankly at Qin Yining, tears welling up in their eyes again. Then, we can only watch as your grandfather, uncle, and cousin are beheaded. Your third cousin's youngest son is only 5 years old. Tears welled up in Qin Yining's eyes. Mother, this is reality. Listen to me. Go back to the Fu now. Claim that you are sick and refuse to see anyone. If old madam wants to see you, you can't talk back to old madam anymore. Mother, you have to recognize the reality. You don't have a maternal family in the future. She no longer had her maiden family. He had no one to back him up. The Sun clan had been the pride and reliance of the Sun clan these past few years. Whenever she quarreled with the old madam and Qin Huayuan, she would often bring up her maternal family and her father. From now on, there would be no one to back her up. Her maiden family had fallen. When Qin Yining saw that the members of the Sun clan were in a daze, he knew that his words had some effect. He hurriedly instructed Mother Jean. First, help Madam return to the Fu. You must advise Madam not to have a direct conflict with old Madam or anyone else. Everything can be discussed after I return home. The Sun clan's matter will soon be known by everyone. Family Qin's situation will soon change. Yes, fourth young Mississippi, Mother Jean nodded heavily. For the first time, she deeply felt that even if Madam didn't have old master's favor, even if Madam lost her maternal family support, as long as fourth young Miss was there, they still had a backbone. Qin Yining instructed the coachman to untie a horse. He turned around and said, I'm going to look for Master Zhong. I might be a bit late. Go back and help me. Bing Tang nodded. Yes. Young miss, don't worry. I will also serve Madam well. Qin Yining shook the reins and urged the horse to leave. Qin Yining didn't learn any riding skills, but he had dealt with wild horses and had ridden wild horses before. Therefore, it wasn't difficult for him to control such a domesticated horse. Soon, he arrived at Master Zhong's house. Master Zhong wasn't home. Seeing that Qin Yining had arrived, the servant immediately rushed to Yuxing in to look for shopkeeper Zhong. At this time, shopkeeper Zhong also knew that something had happened at Duke Ding's Fu. After hearing the servant's message, he quickly rushed home. Without Qin Yining saying anything, he already knew what she was going to do. Boss, don't worry. I'll go get the cash now. No matter what, I'll go to the musical house to rent out the old boss and the womenfolk. Qin Yining saw that Master Zhong's expression was sincere and that he wasn't afraid of getting into trouble. She felt very comforted and grateful. Then I'll have to trouble Master Zhong. Although I'm anxious, what's more important is whether you can immediately send a doctor and midwife to the musical house. My fifth cousin-in-law is about to give birth. I'm afraid that my eighth cousin-in-law's fetus will be affected. Master Zhong was shocked when he heard this and quickly nodded. Okay. Our Zhaoyun agency has a lot of connections. I'll arrange it right away. Mingjie, stay here and listen to your orders. Saving people is as important as putting out a fire. I'll go first. Okay. I'll leave everything to you, Master Zhong. Qin Yining nodded and thanked him. Master Zhong waved his hand and ran out as if his butt was on fire. Qin Yining walked Master Zhong to the door and watched him go away in a hurry. She sat down with a frown. A man in his early 30s had been standing with his head down. Qin Yining finally had time to look at him. He was of medium height, wearing a cotton jacket and a hat. His face was honest and his eyes were sharp. Sensing Qin Yining's gaze, the man saluted. Hello, master. I'm Jing Mingjie. My mother works in the kitchen. So it was him. When Qin Yining was locked up in the ancestral hall, it was Mother Jing who came to deliver food and pass on a message. Later, Mother Jing came to pass on a message to her. At that time, she told Qin Yining that she had a son who was Master Zhong's third shopkeeper. So it's shopkeeper Jing. You flatter me, you flatter me. Thank you for taking care of me. I can follow Master Zhong and learn how to do things. Jing Mingjie saluted. Qin Yining knew that Master Zhong had a sense of propriety. The person who was arranged to work for her must be someone she trusted very much. She didn't doubt the people she used, so Qin Yining directly asked. Zhaoyun Agency originally had 2 brothels. One was changed into a restaurant, and the other is empty. Is that property useful? Master, that property is useless. We only left someone to look after the house. Qin Yining calculated the number of women in Duke Ding's household and thought about the size of the 2 inns under Zhaoyun Agency. It wasn't appropriate to arrange for them to stay in the inns. First, they couldn't stay in the inns. Second, it wasn't safe with so many people coming and going. If she wanted to rent them, she needed a place to stay. Her grandmother's family didn't have a male heir, so she couldn't separate them. After thinking about it, the only vacant property in Zhaoyun Agency that could accommodate all the women of the Sun family was the property that was originally used as a brothel. Shopkeeper Jing, I'll have to trouble you to arrange for people to clean up the house and arrange for the bedding, clothes, and other daily necessities. Just record the expenses and report to Master Zhong. Jing Mingjie understood Qin Yining's meaning and said, Master, you want to arrange for the women of the Sun family to stay there? That's appropriate. The house has been cleaned up and is suitable for people to live in. However, we still need to arrange for some guards to go there. Don't worry, Master. I'll give the order now. Qin Yining nodded and asked Jing Mingjie to go quickly. She waited for the news in Master Zhong's study in the outer courtyard. Master Zhong didn't come back until it was dark. As soon as he entered the door, he said, Fortunately, we went there in time. If we were a little later, I'm afraid that grandmother and her unborn child would have died. She just gave birth to a baby girl. Mother and daughter are safe. I've already arranged for the musical house. They can all be brought here tomorrow. Qin Yining finally felt relieved. He bowed a few times in the air and said gratefully, Thank you, Master Zhong. What are you talking about, Master? My family's lives were saved by you. What's more, my old master used to treat me well. Master, you are a righteous woman. What you did was righteous. I really have no reason to stand by and do nothing. Qin Yining stood up and thought for a while. He said, Zhaoyun Agency has such a wide network. Can you have a say in the prison of the Ministry of Justice? If you can, at least send a message to my grandfather. Tell them that my 5th cousin-in-law gave birth to a daughter safely. Speaking of this, Qin Yining couldn't help but sigh. It's a girl. That's good. If she gave birth to a son. He was afraid that the emperor wouldn't even let go of a newborn. Master Zhong also sighed after hearing this. The matter of Duke Ding's mansion has been spread all over the capital. Everyone knows in private that Duke Ding's family has been wronged. Many scholars who used to admire the talents of Duke Ding's descendants have begun to jointly write a petition. I hope that the emperor will listen to the voices of the people and deal with them leniently. I hope so. Qin Yining had some hope in his heart. However, when he carefully recalled what Guozhang Chao had said today and analyzed the emperor's character, his hope showed signs of being shattered. I'm afraid that the emperor will think that Duke Ding's family specializes in inciting the people and will be even more afraid. Master Zhong's expression turned cold. His heart was also hanging. Qin Yining arranged the matters here and told Master Zhong that he had ordered Jing Mingjie to tidy up the residence for the Sun family's womenfolk to live in. Then, he was going to return to his mansion. He had been out for a day today. His mother had gone home early. He didn't know if something would happen in the face of such a huge change. Moreover, Qin Yining knew that the old madam was a snobbish person who was the best at seeking advantages and avoiding disadvantages. In the past, she had been tolerant of the Sun clan mostly because the Sun clan was supported by Duke Ding's mansion. Now that Duke Ding's mansion had been condemned, the old madam would probably be afraid and hate everyone related to Duke Ding's mansion. She was worried that it would bring disaster to the family Qin. Not to mention that the Sun clan's status in the family Qin would plummet. Even her, the granddaughter who had obtained the Sun family's property, would probably be feared by the old madam. Moreover, she had immediately rented out the Sun family's womenfolk to raise. In the past, she had worked hard to gain the old madam's favor. She was afraid that this matter would wipe her clean overnight. However, she didn't regret it. She also didn't feel that it was a pity. Even if the old madam was tired of her, she could still live a good life. She couldn't disregard the lives of the womenfolk of Duke Ding's mansion just to please the old madam. She rented them out not to show kindness, but to help her mother fulfill her filial duties. It was also for the kinship that Duke Ding's mansion gave her. Qin Yining returned to the mansion. As soon as he entered, he was stopped by Qi Tai, who was waiting at the gatehouse. "Fourth young lady, you're back. Master ordered me to wait here for fourth young lady. Master asked you to go to the study as soon as you came back. He said that he has something to say to you." Chapter 78. Qin Yining was actually very nervous. She wasn't sure about her father's attitude towards the Duke Ding's matter. Her father was a calm, reserved, and resourceful official. This kind of person was definitely not a soft-hearted person. She must save the Sun family's womenfolk. She wasn't afraid of Dowager Duchess opposition because no matter how much Dowager Duchess opposed it, she wouldn't be able to obstruct her actions. But her father was different. If her father was determined to oppose her, he would definitely have a way to control her actions. She nervously followed Qi Tai to the outer courtyard study. As soon as she entered the courtyard, she saw two beautiful maidservants wearing light blue fine cotton coats waiting in the corridor. They were Mo Xiang and Dan Qing. When they saw Qin Yining, the two of them curtsied. One entered the room to pass the message while the other came to greet her. "Greetings, 4th Mississippi Master ordered us to wait here for you." "Thank you, Sister Dan Qing." Dan Qing carefully lifted the dark green bamboo curtain for Qin Yining. Qin Yining nodded and smiled before entering the study. Qin Huayuan was wearing a light gray Taoist robe and a dark blue brocade jacket with a gray mouse fur collar draped over his shoulders. He was sitting cross-legged on the black arhat bed next to the window, reading a book. "You're back. Come and sit down." Qin Huayuan flipped a page of the book. Qin Yining first performed a thorough etiquette before sitting down on the other side of the arhat bed. She took the tea that Mo Xiang brought and placed it on the small table beside her. The maidservants all retreated. Qin Huayuan was still reading. He was multitasking and asked, "What did you do today? Tell me." Although Qin Yining was already mentally prepared, her heart still couldn't help but skip a beat. She hurriedly got up and bowed her head as she replied, "Father, I heard that eldest uncle and second uncle had returned today. I was going to pay my respects to them. I didn't expect that when I arrived at the gate of the Duke's mansion with Mother, I would encounter the confiscation of property." "Yes." Qin Huayuan gently put the book button on the small table. The cover was written with the words "As Zhuan." Chao Guizhang took people to search the house and announced that all the men of the Sun family, regardless of their age, would be beheaded, the women would be escorted to the Jiaodong, and the servants would be sold in 3 days. The onlookers were in an uproar, and Chao Guizhang even ordered people to kill a commoner on the spot to stop the discussion. Qin Huaiyuan asked, and then. Later, Chao Guozhang gave the order to take them away. Grandfather, grandmother, uncle, aunt, cousin, and cousin-in-law were separated forever. The scene was very. Mother cried sadly. We were seen by Chao Guozhang. Although Qin Yining avoided the important and dwelling on the trivial, he had no choice but to tell his father that Chao Guozhang had discovered them. If anything happened, he would be mentally prepared. Qin Huaiyuan pondered for a moment, then nodded and said, "What about you? You didn't do anything after that?" Qin Huaiyuan's voice was low and gentle, as if there was a smile in it, but Qin Yining clearly felt a chill run down his spine. He hurriedly knelt down and saluted. "Father, please calm down." At that time, fifth cousin and fifth cousin-in-law were a young couple, and they didn't want to separate. The scene was really pitiful. When the soldiers tore at each other, fifth cousin-in-law was pushed and fell, which affected the baby. "Father, you also know that the Sun family was wronged. I really couldn't watch fifth cousin-in-law lose her life like that. Therefore, I immediately ordered people to use my connections to save fifth cousin-in-law's life. Fortunately, fifth cousin-in-law gave birth to a baby girl." Qin Yining quickly glanced at Qin Huaiyuan, but Qin Huaiyuan's expression was the same from beginning to end, making people unable to see whether he was happy or angry. Qin Yining had to continue speaking sincerely. "As for the matter of renting the house, I don't think there's any harm in it. Since the emperor has decreed that the Sun family's convicts should enter the Jiaofu as slaves or maids, what he's waiting for is the rental of Zhaoyun agency. There's no other family in the imperial court that has the right to enter the Jiaofu, right? Unless the emperor is so negligent that he doesn't know that Zhaoyun agency has already been given to me. The emperor really doesn't know. It's estimated that the emperor is already regretting it. When he confiscated the Duke Dinggua's estate, he must have been thinking about the business of Zhaoyun agency." Qin Huaiyuan coughed, then said softly, "Impudent." Although his voice wasn't loud, the majesty in his words wasn't lacking. Qin Yining hurriedly kowtowed, "Yes. Daughter knows her mistake, I shouldn't talk about the emperor behind his back." Qin Huaiyuan was amused by her appearance, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. He forced himself not to let the corners of his mouth curl up. "Are you saying that it's wrong to only talk about the emperor?" Qin Yining pursed her lips. When she raised her head, her clear eyes were like a clear spring. She looked at Qin Huaiyuan with confusion. "I didn't disobey the emperor's decree, nor did I do anything excessive. The emperor rules the world with benevolence and filial piety. Even if Duke Dinggua is guilty, there's no reason to ignore the matter of a convict giving birth to a child. I think that even if I don't do anything, the emperor will send someone to save fifth cousin-in-law when he knows. What's more, I'm the owner of Zhaoyun agency. There's a new convict in the Jiaofu, and my Zhaoyun agency is short of manpower. There's nothing wrong with renting her. Isn't the rule of renting people in Zhaoyun agency set by the royal family? You little girl." Qin Huaiyuan picked up Sua Zhuan and gently patted Qin Yining's forehead. "The reason is all yours." It didn't hurt at all. There was a touch of doting in it. Qin Yining touched her forehead. When she looked at Qin Huaiyuan again, the admiration in her eyes almost turned into a hot spring and soaked Qin Huaiyuan in it. Qin Huaiyuan felt warm in his heart and said, "Get up. Danqing just ordered people to prepare osmanthus sugar cake. Have some with me." Qin Yining was not picky about food. She liked to eat everything. But osmanthus sugar cake was her favorite. She didn't expect her father to know. And he even considered that she was busy today and didn't have time to eat. Qin Yining was very moved. She smiled and said yes. Then she got up and sat in the seat just now. Danqing and Ma Xiang came in with all kinds of pastries and gently put them on the small table. Qin Huayuan first picked up a piece of osmanthus sugar cake. Seeing this, Qin Yining also picked up a piece and took a bite. It was fragrant and soft, but not overly sweet. The sweet and delicious taste made her feel much better after a day of tenseness. She couldn't help but feel hungry. She ate 4 pieces in a row and drank a cup of tea. Only then did she feel a little better. When she looked up, she saw that Qin Huayuan was just holding the piece of cake. He didn't eat it. Instead, he smiled and watched her eat. Qin Yining immediately understood that Qin Huayuan was afraid that if he didn't eat, she wouldn't dare to eat either. That was why he picked up a piece for show. "Father." Qin Yining was moved and called out to him. The girl's bright and clear almond-shaped eyes were moist. His heart couldn't help but soften when he looked at her. Her charming appearance was familiar. She was so similar to himself when he saw himself in the mirror when he was young. Such an intelligent and lovely child was the only bloodline he could possibly have in this lifetime. She was the only continuation of his life. Qin Huayuan couldn't help but pat her head. Her eyes were full of surprise and joy. She even instinctively rubbed against his palm like a small animal. Qin Huayuan couldn't help but laugh. So there was this kind of joy in taking care of a child. His daughter was already 14 years old when she came home. She was at an age where marriage could be discussed. However, in Qin Huayuan's eyes, she was just a smart and cunning child. If the world was peaceful, Qin Huayuan wouldn't mind his daughter causing trouble. If his daughter was naughty and got into trouble outside, she would come home crying to him. He could use his ability to help her solve her problems. Then, he would receive her adoration and admiration. How wonderful would that be? Unfortunately, she was born at the wrong time. "Are you full?" Qin Huayuan asked when he saw that Qin Yining wasn't eating. Qin Yining nodded. Her cheeks were red. Qin Huayuan said solemnly, "Although what you've done today is impeccable in terms of morality and reason, you've forgotten what kind of situation you're in right now." Qin Yining lowered her head and said honestly, "Father, I didn't forget. It's just that. It's just that you wanted to do it, so you did it." "Yes." Qin Yining nodded and said, "I just didn't want to do something that went against my conscience. I didn't want to live in regret and guilt for the rest of my life. I know I was taking a risk, but I believe that His Majesty is also a person who cherishes his reputation. Even if he wants to find fault with us, he will find an honorable reason to let himself stand on the moral high ground. I thought about it and felt that there was nothing wrong with it. That's why I took action. It's not that I didn't consider our family situation." Qin Yining glanced at Qin Huayuan. Seeing that his expression remained the same, she continued, "Moreover, I am Father's daughter. Father is now the Grand Preceptor of the Crown Prince. If something happened to my maternal grandmother's family and I didn't do anything when I clearly had the ability to save fifth cousin-in-law, how would the world talk about our family? How would they talk about Father? Wouldn't we become ingrates who are greedy for life and afraid of death? Daughter doesn't want Father's reputation, which has been pure for his entire life, to be tainted because of a moment of fear." Qin Huayuan was silent for a moment. He didn't say anything. He didn't reprimand Qin Yining, nor did he blame her for her mistakes. After a while, he finally said, "What do you plan to do next?" Qin Yining saw that Qin Huayuan didn't object. Her hanging heart finally relaxed. In her heart, she was even more certain of her father's character and worshipped him. She knew that if Qin Huayuan didn't want her to save fifth cousin-in-law, he had 10,000 ways to erase what she had done so that no one would be able to use it against them. Since her father didn't stop her, it meant that he tacitly approved of her actions and would help her deal with the aftermath. However, there were some things that she could do, but Qin Huayuan's position wasn't convenient for him to do. Qin Yining was somewhat excited. Her mind was also active. After thinking for a while, she said, replying to father, the next most important thing is mother. Then there is the execution in 3 days. If the emperor doesn't give orders, the people who are executed in this dynasty will be thrown into a mass grave. He didn't say that people can't help collect the corpses. Upon hearing this, Qin Huaiyuan said, I thought you would ask me to beg the emperor for mercy and let go of the male members of your maternal grandfather's family. Qin Yining smiled bitterly and said, it's easy for me to beg you, but it won't be easy for you to beg the emperor. The emperor was frightened by De Zhou's letter of credence. He must find a way to appease De Zhou's anger. The Sun family was unlucky enough to bump into the knife's edge. The emperor had already made up his mind to cut them down. When a person was afraid, one side of the scale was their own life and the other side was other people's lives. Naturally, they would choose to protect themselves. Even if Qin Huaiyuan went and talked until his mouth was broken, it would be useless. He might even get himself into trouble. If he didn't handle it well, he might even harm his entire family. Qin. Chapter 79. Qin Huaiyuan had come into contact with many people as an official in the imperial court, but there weren't many people like Qin Yining, who happened to have the same thoughts as him and could understand his thoughts without him saying anything. She was his daughter after all. Not only was her appearance and behavior similar to his, but she was also very intelligent. Qin Huaiyuan was very happy in his heart and said with a warm expression, you actually understand father's difficulties. Qin Yining said seriously, father was able to reach such a high position as an official under the emperor. I'm afraid that even when you sleep, you have to keep one eye open. It's really taxing on your mind. You are the head of the family. If you are negligent, our family will be like the Duke of Dinggua's family. Sometimes when daughter thinks about it, daughter worries about father's hardships and pressure. It's a pity that daughter is a daughter and can't share father's worries. Seeing her mature appearance at such a young age, Qin Huaiyuan felt that his daughter was very cute. The words she said were the words that touched his heart the most. In this family, not to mention the old madam, even his 2 younger brothers only saw him as a mountain that would never fall. Sometimes, what a man wanted wasn't how much help his family could give him. Just understanding of his efforts and difficulties was enough to warm his heart. Since the discussion had been settled, Qin Huaiyuan said, later, go pay respects to your grandmother. If she asks you anything, answer her properly. Qin Yining understood that Qin Huaiyuan was afraid that she would talk back to the old madam and offend the old madam. Yes, daughter understands. Qin Huaiyuan nodded in satisfaction and said, go back now and properly persuade your mother. She must be very sad. Qin Yining complied. Just as she stood up and bowed, Qi Tai's voice came from outside, Master, someone from the palace came. They said that the emperor summoned you for an urgent matter. They asked Master to quickly enter the palace. Qin Huaiyuan faintly said, I know. Qin Yining's heart trembled, Father, about the Zhao Yun agency, father has his own plans. You can go. His Majesty won't punish you, right? Qin Yining was very worried. If what she had would harm her family, she would rather not have it. Qin Huaiyuan poked Qin Yining's forehead and said, you're a child, so you should do something that only a child should do. You're still young, so don't worry so much. Go and greet your grandmother. Qin Yining rarely heard such an affectionate tone from an elder. She immediately blushed, and her misty eyes curved into 2 crescent moons. She obediently bowed to Qin Huaiyuan and retreated. Qin Huaiyuan watched as Qin Yining walked away, then he ordered Qi Tai to prepare a carriage. Qin Yining hurried back to Ci Shao Garden. Before she reached the front door, she saw a young maidservant squatting on the steps from afar. When she saw her, the maidservant jumped up and ran into the courtyard. She thought it was strange, so she stopped walking and continued walking. Just as she stepped on the steps, she saw Mammy Chin quickly walking out with a lamp. Chin Yining understood in an instant. She greeted Mammy Chin and asked euphemistically, "Mammy Chin, does old madam have any orders?" Mammy Chin bent her knees and curtsied. Chin Yining also curtsied in return. The two went to the side. Mammy Chin lowered her voice and said, "Old madam is not in a good mood. She just took medicine and is sulking. Today, the matter of Duke Ding's family has spread. Old madam was worried and advised First Madam. Perhaps First Madam was in a bad mood and contradicted Old Madam. In anger, Old Madam ordered people to lock First Madam in the ancestral hall to reflect on her mistakes. Fourth Miss, when you see Old Madam later, be careful." Chin Yining was a bit surprised. She wasn't surprised that the Sun clan was muddle-headed, but she was surprised that Old Madam was so snobbish. Old Madam didn't like the Sun clan for a day or two. In the past, she had always endured it, but now, she couldn't endure it for even a day. "Thank you, Mammy Chin. I understand. Although mother is impulsive, her heart isn't bad. Moreover, when encountering this kind of matter, no one would be able to remain calm." There were some who spoke without thinking and offended Old Madam. "Old Madam is wholeheartedly concerned about our family and the entire clan. Sigh, it's all so hard on Old Madam." Upon hearing this, Mammy Chin smiled and said, "I also advised Old Madam like this. With Mammy Chin by Old Madam's side, she's much more reliable than us little girls. When we encounter a problem, we panic." These words were very useful to Mammy Chin. She walked through the door with Chin Yining. Along the way, she had a smile on her face and couldn't help but raise her chin. Chin Yining suppressed the sadness and panic in her heart and forced a smile on her face. The elderly were superstitious. She was afraid that the family Chin would be implicated by Duke Ding's family. If she continued to cry, what could be done? Old Madam. After entering the door, Chin Yining walked around the black-painted screen and entered the inner room. She bowed properly. Old Madam was holding a slender brass pipe and smoking. When she saw Chin Yining come in, she frowned and said in a deep voice, "Why did you come back so late? Where did you go? Don't learn from your mother. Even now, you still can't distinguish between the inside and the outside. Although your maternal family is good to you and gives you money and business, you have the blood of the family Chin flowing in your body. You are still a person of the family Chin. Don't think that you can do anything after inheriting your maternal family's business. It's just a drop in the bucket for them. You're just a little girl with long hair and short knowledge. What do you know? You can be so grateful now. Aren't you afraid of getting into trouble and implicating our Fu?" Chin Yining's heart was in a knot because of the questions of unscrupulous economics that were hurled at her. Even if Xiaoyun Agency was a drop in the bucket for the Sun family in the past, wasn't it important to the family Chin? Why didn't Old Madam give it to her? However, Chin Yining knew that Old Madam's temperament was like this. After all, she was her grandmother. Could she kill her? Old Madam is right. Granddaughter came back long ago. It's just that father asked me to go to the study in the outer courtyard and talked for a long time. It was delayed, so I didn't come to greet you immediately. Chin Yining obediently admitted her mistake. She actually scolded the wrong person? Old Madam was full of anger, but she encountered such a soft rebuff. She couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. How could Chin Yining wait for the Old Madam to admit defeat? Wasn't that waiting for her to bear a grudge? Thus, she immediately gave her a way out. It's all granddaughter's fault for making grandmother worry. Today, Ding General Manor had this incident, and Dezhou's letter of credence was posted all over the streets. Someone was even killed by Chao Guozhang on the street. Right now, it's a chaotic time outside. Granddaughter really shouldn't have returned late. It's just that there was an urgent business matter, so I went to see Master Zhong and asked about the accounts. That's why I came back a little late. Old Madam, please forgive me. Old Madam felt that she could get over it on the surface, and her heart felt much better. And, it's good that you know your mistake. Stand up and talk. Unknowingly, she had forgotten the word she wanted to scold at the beginning. Qin Yining stood up with a smile and took the beauty hammer to massage Old Madam's legs. She only asked some topics such as whether Old Madam's dinner was delicious or not. He didn't have the slightest intention of pleading for leniency for the Sun clan. When Old Madam saw this, her heart felt even better. Right at this moment, the head maidservant Ji Xiang rushed in with a pale face. Old Madam. Something happened outside. What happened? Don't be so flustered. Don't startle Old Madam. Mammy Qin reprimanded. Ji Xiang looked at Qin Yining. Her eyes were full of complicated feelings and pity. She knelt down and said, Old Madam, the men of the Sun family were all pulled out and beheaded just now. Including young Master Biao, who's only 5 years old. Old Madam was shocked. The tobacco pipe and pot in her hand fell to the ground, and the ashes scattered all over the floor. What did you say? Didn't they behead him in 3 days?